Hey guys, in today's video I'd love to hear your thoughts, so be sure to subscribe and leave a comment below. I'm probably losing it. Writing this down is maybe the only thing keeping me from completely cracking. My name's Alex, and last October, I turned 32 and decided I was done with the city. Done with the noise, the memories, this stuff I was trying to run from. You know? Past mistakes, ghost the usual baggage. Anyway, I found this old cabin online, buried deep in Blackwood Forest, New Mexico. Total middle of nowhere vibes, perfect, right? I used to be a cop, worked some messed up cases in isolated places, saw how loneliness could twist people. But after I quit the force, all I wanted was quiet. The city was just a constant scream, and this cabin felt like a silent peace. Just me, the sky, and a whole lot of trees. There was this ghost town nearby, Dust Devil Gulch. Being empty for decades, they said. Locals whispered stories, the kind old timers love to spin around campfires. Disappearances, weird fires, something about a crazy preacher. But come on, stories are just stories, right? I told myself I was too grounded for that crap. Like the past is buried, just like that town. Comforting thought anyway. I rolled into the cabin late afternoon, golden light all over the mountains. Drive was insane, barely a road, just rocks and dust. But the cabin, exactly what I pictured. Rustic, yeah, but solid, a place to breathe. First night was amazing. Fire crackling in the hearth, wind in the pines, and this silence I'd been craving. My German Shepherd Copper was curled up at my feet. Felt right, like I'd finally found my spot. But the quiet didn't last. Second night, sun's gone, pitch black outside. Then I heard it. Faint scratch at the door. Like an animal, but off. Wind, I thought, stray critter. Then it came again, scratching. Looter, rhythmic now. Tap, tap, tap. And barely their whisper bare, but clear as day. Alex. I froze, my name. How? Nobody knew I was here. I left everything behind. I walked to the door, hand shaking like crazy, gripped the handle. Night outside was dead silent. Trees still as statues. No sound at all. I opened the door slow, heart hammering. Nothing, nobody. Just black woods stretching out forever. Copper growled low in his throat for bristling. Something was wrong. Wind picked up then, howling through the trees, but no other sound. I stood there staring into the dark, feeling this chill air just press in on me. Exposed. Vulnerable. I told myself I was imagining things. Mind playing tricks. Closed the door, went back to the fire. But the uneasy man, it just settled in my bones. Days turned into a weird routine. I'd hike around the woods, try to clear my head, chop wood, keep the fire going. Spent hours just listening to the silence, or what should have been silence. But the weirdness, it didn't stop. Every night that whisper, my name. Always softer than the wind, just at the edge of hearing. And then the knocking started. Light taps at first, barely audible against the cabin walls. Thought it was just the old place settling. But the tapping got stronger, more insistent, more deliberate. Dead of night, always. Random times. Always when I was alone, fire dying down. I'd lie awake listening to it, that sound echoing in the silence. Sometimes I'd get up, check the windows, the door. Nothing. No footprints in the dirt, no branches moving, just silence. Creepy silence. One morning, I decided I needed out. Needed supplies, needed to see a living soul. Drove into Silver City, small town a few miles away. Sunlight through the trees, world quiet again, felt almost normal. But then, driving past where Dust Devil Gulch was supposed to be, I saw it. A church, sitting on a hill in the distance. Dilapidated roof caved in, stone walls crumbling. Nothing special to look at, right? Wrong. Something about it twisted my gut. Felt like I'd seen it before, in a dream maybe. The way those broken stones seemed to stare at me. Couldn't shake this feeling, like something was watching, waiting. Got back to the cabin late afternoon, that unease just slammed back into me, heavy as a coffin lid. That night the scratching came back. Louder now, like it was inside the walls, not outside. Copper was on edge, pacing, whining the voice. Then Alex. This time I didn't hesitate. Grabbed my rifle, threw open the door, stepped out into the freezing night. Moon was full, casting these crazy long shadows. I scanned the clearing, every nerve screaming. Nothing. Just trees swaying in the wind, distant coyote howl. Stood there for ages, not even sure what I was expecting. Then I saw it movement near the church. Figure in shadow, just standing there in the moonlight. Had to know. Had to see what was out there. Started walking towards the church, boots crunching on dry ground, Copper right beside me. closer I got, colder it got. Like the day's warmth just got sucked out of the world. Figure was still there, doorway of the church, watching me. Got closer, could see it clearer. Old man hunched over, face hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. Didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Hello. I called out, voice cracking the silence. Man lifted his head, eyes still shadowed, but I felt them on me. Cold. Unnerving. Then, voice way too calm, way too knowing, he spoke. "You're here now, Alex," he said. "And you'll never leave." Didn't know what to make of it. Who was this guy? What did that even mean? Heart hammering, but I was rooted to the spot. Something told me not to move, not to speak. Then, before I could say anything, he just turned and vanished into the church, like swallowed by the shadows. Stood there, staring at the empty doorway, wondering if I'd imagined the whole damn thing. But the feeling something was wrong. Wasn't alone. Something was waiting. Turned and walked back to the cabin, copper glued to my side. Scratches on the walls, whispers. Figure at the church, something was happening here. Something I couldn't explain. But I was starting to realize the past wasn't as buried as I thought. And neither was that man in the church. The days after meeting that man at the church felt like the world tilted. Like the ground shifted under me, and I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't see, couldn't control. Tried to block it out. Whispers, scratching. That thing standing motionless in the church doorway. Tried to tell myself it was stress, isolation, anything but that. But the air in the cabin felt thick, pressing in from all sides. Couldn't shake the image of those shadowed eyes under the hat brim. That voice, calm and certain. "You're here now, Alex, and you'll never leave." Told myself it was just a crazy old hermit, didn't know any better. But the words, they gnawed at me, like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Next few nights, the cabin went full on Psycho House. Whispers started earlier, before I even got into bed. Always my name, always faint, but getting louder. Scratching on the walls wasn't random anymore. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Echoing in the silence like some twisted code. Like the walls were trying to tell me something. Had to fight the urge to answer back, to talk to the damn walls. Shadows in the cabin, they moved wrong. Stretching across the walls in ways that shouldn't happen. Started checking corners before bed, expecting something to step out of the dark. Copper was freaking me out. Used to be so solid, so calm. Now he'd sit at the window, ears pinned forward, growling low at the woods. Other times, he'd whimper, tremble, like he could sense something I couldn't. Something worse. Fourth night, I snapped. Had to know. Had to face it. Wasn't running from problems, wasn't going to let some spooky noises drive me out. But truth was I was scared. Rational brain screamed it was all in my head. But the other part, the part that had seen real darkness, whispered wrong. Something's terribly wrong. Grabbed my flashlight rifle. Told myself I'd find nothing. Prove it was all superstition. Walk to the church, find that old man, get it over with. Night was colder than ever. Wind biting my face as I hiked down the trail to the church. Copper stayed close, body tense, eyes darting. Trees were like silent watchers, casting long, messed up shadows in the moonlight. Didn't see the figure this time, but felt him. Presence hanging in the air, thick as fog. Flashlight beam danced across the church walls, and for a second, I thought I saw movement inside the doorway. Swallowed hard, breath coming fast. Hello, voice sounded weak, swallowed by the night, no answer. Just wind in the leaves. Stepped closer, boots crunching gravel. Reached the doorway, air went ice cold. Door was ajar, faint light flickering inside, not firelight. Sickly, unnatural glow that made my skin crawl. Who's there? Hand tightened on the rifle. Silence. Pushed the door open. Creak echoed through the night. Flashlight shaking in my hand as I shone it inside. Church was dark, except for that faint, flickering light from a small altar at the back. Hard to see details, but something was there. Standing at the altar, just out of the light. Stepped inside, heart pounding, every instinct screaming turn back. But something pulled me forward. Figure didn't move, didn't speak. Back to me. Hello. Voice shaky. Slowly, the figure turned. Him. Man from before altar, head lowered, face shadow. "You came back?" he said, voice slow, deliberate. Same unnatural calm, like it wasn't even his voice. Froze. Heart hammering. "Who are you? Are you?" Rifle raised. Head tilted up. Saw his eyes for the first time. Not normal eyes. Black. lack, empty. No warmth, no humanity, like nothing behind them, just abyss. I told you, Alex, he said, voice cold final. You're here now, and you'll never leave. Wanted to run, legs felt like stone. Copper growled behind me, but I couldn't look away. I've been waiting for you, he went on, voice softer now, almost a whisper. For a long time, air went thick, oppressive. Flickering light at the altar flared, bathed the room in eerie glow. Shadows twisted, warped. Temperature dropped like a stone. Raised the rifle, ready to fight. But before I could move, cold wind rushed through the church, slammed the door shut behind me with a bang. Man's figure gone. Darkness. Swung the flashlight around, panic, nothing, just shadows, faint whisper too soft to hear. Then Copper's growl turned into a snarl. Scream. Spun around, blood ice. Copper on the floor, writhing. Bodhi twisted wrong. Eyes wide, terror. For a second, thought I saw something standing over him, shadow falling across his twitching body. Fired. Shut a code. Rushed to Copper. Empty room. He was gone. Stumbled out of the church, shaking, disoriented, heart racing. Wind stopped. Air deathly still. Barely breath, weight of it all crushing me. Copper gone. Man gone. But something changed. Whatever was waiting in Dust Devil Gulch just beginning. No idea what to do. But I knew one thing couldn't stay. Had to leave. But deep down already too late. Spent hours pacing the cabin, mind racing. Copper gone. Empty space where he should be. Church, shadows. Whispers, men in the hat still there, waiting, watching. Had to leave. Only thing that made sense. Had to get out of Blackwood Forest. Dust Devil Gulch, never looked back. But something pulled me back. Hook in my gut. Compulsion, pack, backpack, essentials, water, food, tools, rifle. Wasn't facing that unarmed. But even loading the truck knew leaving wouldn't fix it. Something in the woods was calling. Dark, ancient. Getting closer. Drive to Silver City was a blur. Hands shaking on the wheel. Headlights cutting through blackness. Nothing felt real. Road endless, trees closing and watching. Glanced in the mirror, expecting to see him. Nothing. Just empty road, endless night. Silver City well past midnight. Pulled into a gas station, desperate for human contact. Attendant old guy, grizzled face. Didn't even blink when I walked in, tired nod. You're out late. Voice rough. Seen it all. Yeah, just gas. Tried to sound normal. He eyed me, gaze lingering. Nodded again. You one of them folks staying out in Dust Devil. Heart skipped. What do you mean at them folks? People come and go. Something wrong out there, he said, voice dropping. Always has been. Folks get drawn in. Some leave, some don't. Words hit like a punch. Whispers figure church, Copper, was I becoming one of them? Already too far gone. Filled the truck, attendant's words echoing. Went inside to pay. He was gone. Store empty. Fluorescent lights flickering, tired of the night. Turned to leave, saw it. Dark shape near the edge of the station, just beyond the lights. Him. Man in the hat, froze, heart hammering. Rustle of leaves behind me. Figure stepped into the dim light, face shadowed. Alex, it whispered. Blood ran cold. Didn't look back. Couldn't. Threw myself into the truck, slammed the door. Breath panicked, engine roared. Foot down, tires screaming, tore out of there. Didn't know where I was going. Silver City too close. Road endless, dark landscape swallowing me. Going back to the cabin, get my stuff, leave for good. Part of me knew it wouldn't work. Thing wasn't tied to Dust Devil Gulch. Tied to me. Drove, didn't stop. Had to outrun it. Outrun whatever it was. Man in the hat, whispers, Copper, none of it made sense. But couldn't ignore it. Then mine finally snapped. Truck sputtered, died. Cursed, slammed the wheel, miles from Silver City, middle nowhere. Truck dead. Headlights flickered, died. Pitch black. Grabbed flashlight, stepped out. Cold night air. Breath puffing out. Forest silent, too silent. Darkness closing in, tightening around my chest. Then I saw it. Figure in the distance, edge of the trees. Froze. Hand on rifle. Him. Man in the hat. Not alone this time. Second figure stepped out of the trees. Tall cloak, face shadowed. Then another. Another. More. Too many to count. Standing just outside the truck lights. Eyes gleaming in the dark. Backed up, breath caught. Not where he can't be. But it was. Stumbled back to the truck, hands shaking, fumbling for the door. Voice echoed from the dark, cold, sharp. You can't run, Alex, man in the hat said. Hollow voice, like coming from the air itself. Spun around, rifle raised. No one there. Figures gone, melted into shadows. Then, corner of my eye, Copper, standing in the distance, eyes glowing, body rigid. unmoving, dead. I'd seen him die, but there he was, beyond the light, waiting for me to come closer. Couldn't stay, knew it now. Not just haunting, not coincidence. Thing had a hold on me, on this place. Wasn't letting go. Turned back to the truck, heart pounding, climbed inside. Engine roared to life again, but didn't drive away. Drove straight for the church. Deep down, knew it started there. Only place it could end. Drove like possessed. Road blurred. Hands white, knuckled on the wheel. Copper's ghost form, burning eyes following, always just out of reach, pulling me towards the church. Night oppressive, air thick. Ancient malevolent shroud. Headlights barely cut through the black. Couldn't stop. Had to go back. Confront it. Dust Devil Gulch dead silent. Trees leaning in, silent witnesses to something long forgotten. Wind whispered in the branches, voice I almost understood, all too familiar, didn't look back. Couldn't. Just drove. Church came into view. Outline dark, twisted against moonless sky. Stomach churn, no denying it now. Whatever was in that place had tied to everything. Whispers, figure, Copper's death. Not coincidence. Being drawn in, moth to a flame. Had to know why. Parked the truck at the clearing's edge. Engine sputtered, dial-in sets. Unnerving. Breath shallow-gethings. Rifle, flashlight, purpose all trembling. Copper's eyes burned in my mind. Almost turned around, almost left. Could not now. Not after everything. Stepped out, air cold on skin, started towards the church. Boots crunching gravel, each step heavier. Church loomed. Door wide open, inviting me in. Smell hit me first. Rotting wood, damp earth, something worse. Metallic SAR burned the back of my throat. Stepped inside. Light flickered weakly from the altar, casting twisted shadows. Air thick, holding its breath for centuries. Weight of ages pressing down, there he was. Man in the hat. Back to me, head bowed. Reverence. No malice. Choking malice. You've come, he said, voice low, hollow, pulled from some dark place. Knew you would. We've been waiting. Grip tightened on the rifle, hands trembling. What do you want from me? No answer. Turned slowly, eyes met mine. Nothing human, emptiness. You never left. Alex, always going to be here. Like everyone else, shook my head, fighting to stay grounded. I'm not like them. Nod. Already lost. Just the beginning. Man's lips smile. Not a smile. Darker. Twisted. Predator about to strike. Always meant to be part of it. He whispered. This place doesn't let go, Alex. Not until it has what it wants. Stepped closer, presence suffocating. Walls closing in. Church no longer building. Alive. Breathing. Pulsing with something I couldn't comprehend. Lights flickered against shadow of another figure behind him. Familiar. Copper. Froze. Breath caught. There he was, back of the church, body twisted wrong. Eyes glowing coals. Not my dog anymore. Something else. Something taken. Copper. Whispered. Barely audible? Men laughed. Well, cruel. Think he's still your dog. Think you can save him. He is ours now. Just like you will be. Lifted the rifle, pointed it. Hands shook, steadied myself. Couldn't let them win. Couldn't let them take me. You'll have to kill me first. Voice harder now. More defiant. Man didn't flinch, didn't move. Just waited, watched. Then voice from everywhere at once. You are already dead, Alex. You just don't know it yet. Church prison. Walls closing in. Air thick, suffocating. Scratching again, louder, echoing from everywhere. Whispers filled the room. All at once, words shattered me. You are one of us now. Fired, shut deafening in the church. Smoke cleared. Man still standing, unscathed. Bullet passed through him like smoke. Understood then, not real, none of it. Church figures, copper light trap. Walked right into it. Ground trembled, walls warped, shifted. Church alive. Altar cracked open. Dark gaping hole beneath. Felt the pull. Hunger from below. Calling me. Try to run. Floor gave way. Fell, rifle slipped from my hands, tumbled into darkness. Woke up in a place not a place. Endless darkness. No sounds, no whispers. Oppressive silence. Couldn't move, couldn't feel. Mind fog, chest unbearable pain. Then I heard it. Copper voice, low familiar, calling from the dark. Turned. There he was. Distance. Eyes not his, eyes of something else. Something waiting knew then. No escaping. Not ever. Darkness claimed me. Church claimed me. Never leave. Just another lost soul. Another whisper in the wind. Trapped in the place always waiting for me. Man in the hat right all along. Never meant to leave. And now I never would. My name's Alex and I'm 27. August of last year, 2023, I did something so unbelievably dumb it still keeps me up at night. Seriously, I should have known better than to take that deeder. Sarah warned me. It's a bad idea, Alex, she said, all serious, but you know how it is when a good story's calling your name. I'm a sucker for urban legends, always have been. We were driving through West Virginia, me, Sarah, and Chris. Road trip, right? Supposed to be fun. The plan was simple to check out some of the backwoods caves around the Appalachians. Get some cool pics for my blog, maybe even some video for Sarah's documentary thing she was working on. Easy peasy. Or so we thought. It started when Chris, Mr. Know-It-All, mentioned this cave near Seneca Rocks. Said it was a local secret, hidden entrance and all. Heard whispers, the kind that make your ears prick up. People go in, they don't come out. Classic campfire story stuff, the kind that makes you laugh nervously, and then maybe, just maybe, double check your car doors are locked at night. Funny thing is, we actually went for it. Hours on the road already, deep into these twisty mountain roads. Air was thick, summer humid, sun starting to sink. We finally found the spot where Chris said the entrance was supposed to be. Parked the Jeep by this creepy old shack, the kind of place that screams of abandoned. Wood rotting, paint peeling, the whole 9 yards. Felt like we were in a horror movie set. You sure about this? Chris, Sarah asked, clutching her camera like it was a shield. Chris naturally was loving it, grinning like a maniac. Dude, this is it. Entrance ain't far. We grabbed our gear. Me, backpack with the usual stuff, flashlight, camera, first aid kit, the works. But I had this knot in my stomach, this bad feeling I tried to ignore. Didn't want to be that guy, the scaredy cat. Sarah was already filming, soaking up the spooky vibes. Chris was practically bouncing ahead, all swagger and confidence, like he was on some epic quest. Took us maybe 20 minutes of hiking to find it, the cave mouth. Blocked by this massive boulder, like someone or something really didn't want people getting in. Sarah checked her GPS, confirmed it was the spot. We spent the next few minutes wrestling with that rock. Finally, with a grunt and a shove, the entrance yawned open. Dark. Cold air rushed out, even colder than the evening air. Felt like the cave was breathing, waiting. This is it, I said, glancing back at Sarah and Chris. Mix of excitement and, yeah, a little fear in my voice. Sarah was definitely nervous. Hands a little shaky as she adjusted her lens. Always the cautious one, Sarah. The voice of reason in our little trio. Chris, though. Dude was practically vibrating with excitement. This is the moment, Alex. Its voice low, almost daring me to chicken out. So we went in. Footsteps echoing in the dead silence. Air inside was thick, heavy. Deeper we went, the outside world just vanished. Like the cave was swallowing sound itself. Walls were jagged, floor and Evan had to watch every step. Darkness pressed in, suffocating. Couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong, but I pushed it down. Story to get, remember. Felt like we walked for an hour. Only sounds were our breathing, the crunch of our boots on stone. Chris took the lead, bravado in full swing. Sarah stayed close behind, camera always rolling, eyes darting around, always cautious. I hung back a bit, trying to get footage, trying to focus. And then we met him, he just appeared, standing there by the cave wall. Clothes all ragged, blending into the shadows. Skin pale, unnatural pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes sharp, like they could see right through you. The kind of eyes that make you feel like you're caught in something way bigger than yourself. The man smiled. Wide, unsettling smile that made my skin crawl. Red, he introduced himself, but something was off. The way he moved, the way he looked at us, like we were supposed to be there. Is it wise to venture this far? He asked. Voice too soft for the rough cave, too calm. Chris, of course, stepped right up. Just exploring, he said, grinning. Heard some stories. Thought we'd check it out. Red nodded, like that made perfect sense. Stories, you say? Well, I'm a man of wagers. His eyes gleamed in the dark. I'll make you a deal. Stay here in this cave until sunrise, and I'll grant you each a wish. Anything you want. Sarah actually laughed, raising an eyebrow. You're serious. Red's smile widened. Why else would I be here? I glanced at Sarah, who looked seriously creeped out. Then at Chris, who was already practically drooling, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Typical Chris, always chasing the thrill. Sarah started to say something. Chris, this is... But Chris cut her off, waving a hand. We're doing it, Sarah. Come on, it'll be fun. What's the worst that could happen? Famous last words, right? Sarah still looked unsure, but I knew Chris. He wasn't backing down from a dare, no matter how dumb. and I wasn't about to let him drag us into something alone. All right, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. We'll do it. But what exactly do you mean wishes? Red leaned in, eyes twinkling. You'll see. I'm not one for explanations. Let's just say you'll be granted what your hearts truly desire. Chris was already nodding, stepping forward, practically itching to start this insane wager. Sarah hesitated, glanced at me. Silently begging for backup, I just shrugged. The knees in my chest was growing, but still manageable. All right, I said again, trying to ignore the dread. One night, till sunrise. Red's grin never wavered. Excellent. He stepped back into the shadows, melting into the darkness. I'll be here when the night ends. As we set up camp, that feeling of terrible mistake just wouldn't leave me. But in the back of my mind, I told myself it was just a wager. Some weird old guy messing with us. Nothing more. Right. Still, as the cold air seeped in, and the shadows seemed to stretch way too long, I couldn't help but wonder if we've just made a deal with something we really didn't understand. I stared into the fire, but even as the flames danced, I felt like we were being watched. And then I heard it, the first whisper, faint but unmistakable. And that's when I knew deep down we were in way over our heads. I don't know exactly when things started to shift, but by the time that first whisper snaked through the cave, regret was already a bitter taste in my mouth. We'd set up a pathetic little camp just inside the entrance cavern where the air was just cold enough to be uncomfortable, but not bone-chilling yet. I kept repeating to myself, nerves, just nerves, trying to convince myself there was nothing actually wrong with the night. But the deeper we'd gone, the more the cave felt hungry, like a giant silent mouth ready to swallow us whole. The walls seemed to close in, even though I knew logically they weren't moving. And the darkness, it was thick. Thicker than any natural dark should be. Sarah, bless her pragmatic heart, had her camera rolling, trying to capture the shadows dancing on the walls, the weak flicker of our campfire. She was trying to keep it light, making small talk about her documentary, how this cave would be an amazing natural set, how timeless it all felt. But even Sarah's usual steady voice had a tremor in it. She was spooked, no doubt. Chris, on the other hand, was in his element, danger junkie. He had that stupid, cocky grin plastered on his face, staring into the fire like it held all the answers. The firelight flickered in his eyes, making them gleam in a way that wasn't exactly reassuring. He wasn't even trying to hide how much he was digging this whole strange wager with a creepy stranger thing. For Chris, this was just the ultimate adventure, bragging rights for days when we got back to civilization. If we got back, dude, this is going to be epic, Chris said, finally breaking the strained silence. I mean, think about it. We're spending the night in, like, the most cursed cave in the state. And we've got some freaky dude offering us wishes. What's the worst that can happen? Sarah just shook her head, rolling her eyes, but not really laughing. It just feels wrong, Chris. Seriously, people don't just vanish for no reason. This place is dangerous. I had to admit I was leaning Sarah's way. Something about this whole situation was screaming red flags. Maybe it was the oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides, or the way the shadows moved even when the firelight was steady. Whatever it was gnawing at me, but I didn't want to be that guy. The scared one, the buzzkill. After a few more minutes of tense quiet, Chris suddenly stood up, stretching like he was about to conquer the world. All right, boredom's setting in. I'm going to check out the rest of this place. See if there's anything else worth documenting. Anyone want to join? Nope, Sarah said instantly, not even looking up from her camera. I'm good here. I didn't want to go either, but Chris was already striding off into the deeper darkness, his boots crunching on the stone floor. Without even thinking about it, I stood up. I'll go with you. I blurted out, surprising myself as much as anyone. I wasn't sure why I said it. Maybe I didn't want to be left alone with Sarah and my own creeping fear. Maybe I was actually curious about the cave despite everything. Or maybe I just didn't want to look like coward in front of Chris. Sweet. Chris grinned, that cocky, unsettling grin. Sarah, you hold down the fort. We'll be back in a bit. Sarah watched us go, but there was a tightness around her mouth, a worry in her eyes that I really didn't like. I waved it off, telling myself she was just being Sarah, always cautious. Nothing to worry about. We walked deeper into the cave, the air dropping colder with every step. The silence was back, heavier than ever. Felt like the cave was actively sucking sound out of the air. Even Chris, usually a non-stop talker, was unnervingly quiet. We turned down a narrow passage, walls closing in, scraping against my shoulders as we squeezed through. "Betcha $10 there's a treasure chest down here," Chris said suddenly, trying to break the silence with his usual bravado. But even his voice sounded different, echoing strangely like it was coming from somewhere further away than just beside me. I forced a chuckle. A treasure chest. Seriously, like pirate gold. Chris glanced back at me, grinning, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Dude, you'd be surprised. Weird stuff happens out here. People go missing, things go bump in the night. There's always something hiding beneath the surface." The way he said it, a shiver crawled down my spine. It wasn't just about the cave anymore. It felt darker. I looked around the passage. Narrow, winding, and the stone walls seemed to ripple in strange patterns, like they were breathing. Definitely not a normal cave vibe. This place felt wrong. We kept going, the silence pressing down again. The deeper we went, the more disoriented I felt. All the walls started to look the same, dark, jagged, completely lightless. I stopped for a second, squinting into the black ahead. "Chris," I called out. But my voice just seemed to vanish, swallowed by the cavern. The only answer was the faint, distant sound of Chris' boots scraping on rock. "Chris!" I tried again, louder this time. Nothing. No reply. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I took a few steps forward, my flashlight beam cutting a weak path through the oppressive dark. I was about to yell again when I heard it. A whisper. Soft, barely audible, but definitely there. And it wasn't Chris. I spun around, flashlight beam dancing across the shadows. Nothing. Just the cold, damp rock. I was alone, standing in the middle of this vast, unknown darkness. "Chris." I called again, my voice shaky now. And then, from somewhere behind me, I heard him answer. His voice closer than it should have been, but it wasn't right. Low, strained, unnatural. "You shouldn't have come, Alex," the voice said, distorted like it was someone else entirely. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. That wasn't Chris. I turned, frantically sweeping the flashlight beam around. No sign of him. Just shadows, stretching and twisting into shapes I couldn't quite make out. Then I heard it again, the whisper. "You shouldn't have come." But this time it wasn't just a voice. It was in the air, surrounding me. The walls seemed to close in tighter. The shadows reached out like they were trying to pull me into the dark. I couldn't move. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. I backed up slowly, stumbling, bumping into something solid. It was Chris. His face was twisted in a grin, but his eyes were black. Completely black. No light, no recognitions. Just emptiness. "Chris," I whispered, my voice a choked gasp. Chris's mouth opened. But instead of speaking, he let out a low growl. A sound that wasn't human. His teeth, sharp, jagged more like animal fangs than human teeth, glinted in the dim flashlight beam. His fingers were twisted, nails long and sharp, scraping against the stone. "Chris." I tried again, but the words felt like they were dying in my throat. The air around us was too thick to breathe. "Jet out." The voice that sounded like Chris whispered again. "Before it's too late." Suddenly, the air shifted. The shadows moved, unnaturally fast, like they were alive. I spun on my heel and ran, bolted back the way we'd come, adrenaline flooding my veins. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Chris's footsteps. But also something else. A growl. Something else was chasing me. And it wasn't human. I didn't dare look back. The cave seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness swallowing me whole as I ran towards what I prayed was the exit. I didn't know where Chris was anymore. But I knew one thing for sure: I had to get out. I ran. Legs burning, lungs screaming, but my mind was locked on one thing: out. Get out of the cave. Alive. The further I ran, the more twisted the sounds behind me became. Growls, whispers, the scraping of something monstrous, all tangled together, a nightmare soundtrack I couldn't escape. Air was thick, suffocating. I stumbled over loose stones, scraping my hands raw against the cold, jagged walls. Breath came in ragged gasps, heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode, drowning out everything else. Pushed myself harder, flashlight beam bouncing wildly, barely lighting the path ahead. Darkness clawing at me, trying to drag me down, swallow me whole. Didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Until finally I saw it, faint outline of the cave entrance. Ahead. Just a glimmer of lighter black in the oppressive blackness. I can make it. But just as hope flickered, something grabbed my ankle. yanked me back with brutal force. I screamed, tried to shake it off, kicking wildly. Flashlight ripped from my hand, beam spinning, then darkness. Scrambled on the ground, panic seizing me. The thing, whatever it was, dragged me deeper into the cave, and it was getting colder. Temperature plummeting with every dragging inch. Chris's face loomed in the shadows. Twisted grin, eyes still black pits. The thing that had been Chris, the thing that wasn't Chris anymore. It laughed, not a human laugh. Guttural, animalistic. The voice that came from its mouth wasn't even his. You shouldn't have run, Alex, it rasped. You agreed to the wager, didn't you? Jerked my leg free, scrambling backwards, chest heaving, gasping for air. This wasn't Chris. This was something else entirely. You're not Chris, I shouted, voice weak, swallowed by the cavern. What have you done to him? The creature, it didn't answer, lunged. Faster than anything human could move. Rolled to the side, barely dodging its clawed hand as it slashed the air where I'd been. Force of the movement threw me off balance, tumbling to the ground. Scrambled back to my feet, pure panic short-circuiting my brain. Couldn't breathe, just survive. Whatever this thing was, it wanted me to fail. Wanted to drag me deeper into this hellhole. Ran again, towards the entrance. Only place I had a chance, flashlight gone. But just enough dim light filtering from the cave mouth to guide me. Didn't dare look back to see if it was following. Could hear it though, its breath, heavy and ragged behind me, growing louder, burst into open air. Sudden moonlight almost blinding after the crushing darkness. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. Just ran. Fast as my legs would carry me, lungs burning. Didn't stop until I reached the Jeep. Hands shaking so bad I could barely fumble with the door handle. Threw myself inside, slammed the door shut. Engine roared to life, slammed the gear shift into drive. Hands slick with sweat, heart still trying to claw its way out of my chest. Sped away from the cave. Didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. Didn't know what happened to Chris. Didn't know what that thing was. But one thing was crystal clear. I'd made a colossal, catastrophic mistake. Drive to the nearest town was a blur of headlights and empty highway. Didn't stop. Didn't care about getting lost. Didn't care about anything but distance. Distance from that cab. Finally reached Carlsbad. Pulled into a gas station, practically fell out of the Jeep, collapsing against the pumps. Legs shaking, body trembling uncontrollably. Adrenaline crash, fear. The sheer horror of it all. Had to tell Sarah. She was still back there, still in that cave. Grabbed my phone, hands shaking too badly to dial properly. Finally got her number punched in. Rang once or twice, 3 times voicemail. Sarah, I whispered, pleading. Please pick up. I don't know what's happening. Chris is gone. And I don't know what we've done. We need to leave. You need to get out of there. Please, Sarah, answer. Voicemail beeped off. Dead silence of the night. Swallowed hard, stomach twisting into knots. What was I supposed to do? Knew I had to go back. Couldn't leave her there, even though every cell in my body screamed, don't go back. Couldn't leave her alone in that hell. Couldn't leave her with that thing. Next few hours, a blur, just kept driving. Like I could outrun whatever was chasing me, whatever was waiting in the darkness. Eventually found myself back at the turnoff for the cave. No choice. Had to face what I'd run from. Entrance was just as I remembered. Boulders that we'd struggled to move no shifted. Seemingly moved aside like welcoming me back. Parked the Jeep, grabbed my flashlight, trembling as I approached the cave mouth. Could feel it again. Weight of the air. Cold seeping out like something unnatural had settled here. Waiting for me to return. Sarah, I called out, voice swallowed by the silence. No answer. Stepped inside careful this time. Breath catching in my throat. Cave was silent, just like before, but different now. Empty. And then I heard it. Low, distant whisper made my blood run ice cold. Alex, the voice said. Not quite Sarah's. Too close. Alex, why did you leave me? Froze. Hairs on my neck standing on end. Turned slowly, and there, standing at the far end of the cave. Sarah. But not Sarah, face pale, eyes empty, whites of her eyes sickly yellow. Motionless. Staring at me with utter sorrow. Sarah. I choked, stepping forward, cautiously. You shouldn't have come back, she whispered. Voice hollow, echoing like something speaking from a deep, empty well. You didn't listen. You agreed to the wager. I took a step back, body shaking. Sarah, please, what happened to you? Her lips curled, twisted smile. You don't understand, Alex. You never did. And then, with a sudden, horrifying lurch, her figure shifted, revealing something darker, something wrong. Standing where Sarah had been, the thing grinned, eyes black voids, and it laughed. "Too late for you," it said. Voice not Sarah's, something much older, something demonic, realized then, as the cold closed in suffocating. The wager that had never been for us. It had been for the thing waiting for us all along. And it was just getting started. And there was no way out. Stood frozen, heart hammering, air suffocating. The thing in front of me, once Sarah, now something far darker, smiled, like it had been waiting for this final act. Her eyes, what had once been her eyes, were black as pitch, devoid of anything human. Cave seemed to shrink, walls thickening, shadows stretching alive. "You shouldn't have come back, Alex," the thing hissed. Voice a discordant blend of Sarah's and something else. Something ancient, malevolent. "The wager was never yours to win." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Tried to swallow, throat dried tight. Like the very air had solidified around me. Whispers, faint and distant, filled the space, mingling with a low, guttural growl that seemed to rumble from deep within the earth. "You never should have entered this cave." The thing's smile twisted wider, lips curling unnaturally. "It isn't a place for mortals, and now you'll pay the price." Thoughts scrambled, trying to make sense of it. This wasn't Sarah. And yet it was. This creature, whatever it was, had taken her, twisted her, into something unnatural, the wager a trap. From the moment we stepped into the cave, we were bound, just like Red had said. We were never meant to leave. "Chris," I muttered. But the word was hollow in the dark, swallowed by the cavern. Where was Chris? What had happened to him? Didn't want to think about it. Didn't want to remember his twisted form, his inhuman eyes. "Chris," I repeated, voice shaken. No response. Only the eerie, suffocating silence, punctuated by those faint whispers. The thing that had been Sarah took a slow, deliberate step forward, long, clawed fingers stretching out, beckoning. "You still think you can escape?" she whispered, voice soft, almost coaxing. "It's too late, Alex. The deal is done." The moment she said that, something inside me, flash of rage, desperation. Couldn't accept this. Couldn't let this thing win. "No," I screamed, voice echoing off the walls. "You're not her. You're not Sarah." Backed up slowly, mind racing, trying to find any way out. Red's words echoed in my head, "Stay here until sunrise, and I'll grant you a wish." What did it mean? Was there a way out? Some trick to undo this curse? Spun around, scanning the cave. Flickering shadows. Heavy darkness pressing in. Felt like the cave itself was trying to trap me, devour me. Ground beneath me shifted, trembled, like something huge was moving underground. Then out of the corner of my eye I saw it. Small opening in the far corner of the cave, barely big enough to crawl through, like the cave itself had opened up, just enough to offer a sliver of hope. Heart pounded, didn't hesitate, sprinted for the opening, breath coming in ragged gasps. "Alex!" The creature Sarah thinks screeched behind me. "You can't escape, it's already too late." Didn't stop. Feet pounding, dove for the opening. No turning back now. Crawled through the narrow passage, walls scraping my skin, damp air thick, choking. Could hear the thing's voice fading behind me, but still echoing in my ears, whispering of my fate. "You shouldn't have come back. The wager is done. It's too late for you." But I couldn't let that be the end. Couldn't die here. Finally, after what felt like hours crawling through the dark, I emerged into a small chamber. Didn't stop to look around. Air still thick, but I could see faint light filtering from the far side of the chamber. Heart thudded harder. I can make it. Stumbled to my feet, legs weak from crawling. Exit so close, just a few more steps. Ran towards it, feeling myself pulled forward by sheer willpower. Then suddenly, cold hands shot out from the shadows, grabbed my ankle. Screamed. Before I could pull away, dragged back. Slammed into the cold, damp ground. Vision blurred with panic, heart stopped, looked up. Chris. His face as inhuman as Sarah's had become. Skin gray, eyes black pits of emptiness. Body twisted, malformed, grinned. That familiar grin, but no warmth. "Just wrong. You think you can leave," Chris whispered. Voice guttural, distorted. "There's no escape. The devil doesn't let his bargains go unfulfilled." Words hit me like a punch to the gut. The devil, Red, he hadn't been just some creepy old man offering a wager. He'd been the devil himself, playing with us, toying with our souls, the whole cave, the wager, all part of his plan. Struggled beneath Chris's grip, fighting against the crushing force holding me down, but he was too strong. Wasn't gonna make it out. Then I heard it, faintest sound in the distance, unmistakable call of the wind, soft at first, but growing louder, clearer. A scream, a woman's scream, and then realization. It was Sarah's voice. She was still here, still trapped, still alive. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. Didn't care about consequences anymore. Had to free her. Had to end this. Sarah, I screamed, straining against Chris's hold. I'm sorry. I'll make it right. Just hold on. Wind carried her scream again, louder this time. Cry filled with pain, fear. Sound fueled something in me. Final, desperate surge of defiance. With every ounce of strength left, I shoved Chris off, scrambled to my feet. Couldn't stop now. Had to end the deal. Had to stop whatever Red and his twisted game had planned for us. Heart pounding, I turned back to face the cavern. No idea what was waiting. But one thing was clear. I was going to finish what we started. As I ran towards Sarah's scream, I heard Red's voice behind me. Slow, calculating, like a predator closing in. It's too late, Alex, he said, words dripping with amusement. You were always going to lose. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Couldn't let the devil win. Yo, name's Jake. I'm 36, and what I'm about to tell you happened last October 2023. It went down near Blackwood Forest, Maine. Ever heard of it? Probably not. It used to be this big nature preserve, all lush and green. Now, dead quiet, spooky quiet. And the woods are thick, man, like they're trying to swallow you whole. I moved out there almost a year ago. Needed to ditch the city, the people, the whole damn rat race. Just wanted some peace, you know. But peace ain't what I found. Not even close. See, I was living completely off grid when Sarah showed up. Honestly, I rolled my eyes when I saw her pull up in her Jeep. Another city slicker. Probably heard some dumbass ghost story about Blackwood and wanted to play Nancy Drew. People are obsessed with the cursed woods, but it's just woods, right? Tough woods, sure, but nothing supernatural. That's what I thought anyway. Boy, was I wrong. It was mid-afternoon when Sarah hiked up to my cabin, all kitted out with camera gear. Journalist through and through. She had this look in her eyes, like she was hungry for a story, any story. But something about her confidence rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was how she walked like she owned the place, or how she talked about Blackwood, like it was just some backdrop for her little article. Didn't seem to register with her that this land, it has teeth. I've heard things about this place. She says, all business, hand outstretched for a shake. Locals talk. I want to know what's really going on. Her voice was steady, even with the creepy vibe of the woods hanging around us. I hesitated, then took her hand. Name's Jake, I grunted. Army nickname stuck, I guess. You're looking for trouble, Sarah. Blackwood doesn't give up its secrets easy. She just grinned like I'd just thrown down a challenge. That's why I'm here. I didn't have the energy to argue. Didn't really care. To be honest, she was just passing through. As long as she didn't mess with my quiet, I wasn't going to waste my breath. That first night, I showed her where she could pitch her tent. Good distance from my cabin. No need to invite her in, no need to share my space. She was itching to explore, and I wasn't about to give her a lecture on wilderness survival. After some canned beans, I wished her luck and retreated to my cabin. Wind was picking up, howling through the trees. Blackwood has this way of deadening sound. Makes you feel like you're the last person alive. Around midnight, I jolted awake. Wind had died down, but there was this weird noise in the distance. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, but not like any animal I knew. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, and there she was, Sarah, standing at the edge of the woods back to me, totally still. Freaky Sarah. I called, voice cutting through the cold night air. No answer. Just stood there, frozen. Sarah, louder this time, crunching frost under my boots as I got closer. She finally snapped around, eyes wide. Freaked. Oh, I'm sorry, she stammered, words trailing off like she lost her train of thought in the dark. Just I heard something. You okay? I asked, trying to figure out what was going on. Something, she whispered, breath coming in ragged gasps. Something out there. Felt like watching me. I didn't say anything for a beat. Being in the wilderness long enough to know how sounds can mess with your head, especially at night, when the woods come alive with all sorts of creepy crawlies. But the fear in her voice of it was real. Too real. Didn't hear anything, I said, keeping my voice steady. Get some sleep. Probably just an animal. She nodded, but her eyes kept flicking back to the trees, like she expected something to jump out any second. Yeah, fine. Wasn't convinced, but what could I do? Wasn't about to babysit her. I went back to my cabin, locked the door, sat up for a while listening for anything weird myself. Couldn't shake this little seed of unease settling in my gut. Still, eventually drifted off, hoping it was just her city girl nerves acting up. Next morning, I woke up and Sarah was already packing up camp, standing by her tent, fiddling with her camera lens. Like nothing happened the night before. Almost asked her if she slept okay, but figured I'd let it slide. Everyone deals with fear their own way. Hear anything else last night? I asked. Casual, taking a swig from my canteen. She paused, looked away. No, she said after a long beat. Voice steady, too steady. Nothing at all. It wasn't just fear with her. It was something deeper. Something I couldn't put my finger on. Didn't push it though. Instead, I invited her to hike with me to some geothermal vents nearby. Give her something to focus on. And keep her at arm's length. We hiked for hours. Woods were choked with silence. At one point, Sarah stopped dead, pointing off the trail. What's that? She whispers, voice all tight with a mix of excitement and dread. I squinted, followed her finger. Just past the trees, there it was. A dead animal. Carcass all rotted, skin stretched tight over its ribs. Being there a while, scavengers had picked it clean. But something was off. The way it was laid out, smack in the middle of the path. Like someone put it there. Doesn't look like any predator did that. I said, voice low. Looks placed. Sarah creeps closer, camera up, snapping pics. Think it's a warning, but my gut clenched. Something was wrong. Seriously wrong. We weren't alone out here. We kept walking, but the air had changed. Felt heavy. No wind, no birdsong, not even a rustle of leaves. Like the whole damn forest was holding its breath. When we finally got to the geothermal vents, steam hissing out of the ground, I noticed something else. In the dirt, near the vents, a weird pattern. Footprints, but not animal tracks. Too human looking. And they led into the woods, deeper into the trees, like someone had been standing there, watching us. That evening, back at my cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Sarah seemed to feel it too, though she wasn't saying much. Tried to focus on the fire, the crackling logs, but it just made the silence around us feel even heavier. Then, after dark, it happened. Faint whisper carried on the night air. Barely audible over the fire crackling. Jakey. Froze solid. Sarah stiffened beside me, hand darting to the knife on her belt. Did you hear that? She breathed, voice low, tight. I nodded. Yeah, heard it. We both snapped our heads towards the woods. Trees were still, unmoving. No sign of anyone, no rustling leaves, no footsteps. Probably just the wind, I muttered, but even I didn't believe it. The night felt wrong. Pressed down on me, thick and suffocating, like the air itself was holding its breath. Sarah just stared into the fire, but her eyes kept darting back to the tree-line. Stopped talking completely. Couldn't blame her. I felt it too. This weird, unnerving silence that had settled over Blackwood since that whisper. Neither of us could shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Not just alone in the woods, but like something was present. Some kind of presence that made your skin crawl, like the shadows themselves were watching. Lived out here long enough to know the difference between an animal's warning call and something else. Something sinister. Wind picked up again, rattling branches overhead. But the forest itself stayed unnaturally still, like it was holding its breath. Maybe we should head back to the cabin. Sarah finally said, voice soft but firm. She wasn't asking. She'd already made up her mind. Didn't blame her. Wasn't sure how much longer I could sit there in the dark, listening to the night whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. Yeah, I agreed, trying to shake off the unease churning in my stomach. Let's go. We packed up quick, didn't bother talking. Left the fire to burn itself out. Didn't take long to fall into step on the path back to the cabin. Familiar path, but it felt different now. Forest felt closer, darker. Shadows felt thicker. Trees seemed to lean in. Then I saw it. First time, thought my eyes were playing tricks. Flash of movement in the trees, just at the edge of my vision. Stopped dead in my tracks, heart hammering. What is it? Sarah whispered, noticing me freeze. Voice way too loud in the quiet woods. Didn't answer right away. Couldn't. Strained my ears, trying to catch anything that would explain the ice crawling up my spine. No footsteps. No animal sounds. No wind. But there was a sound, faint scraping sound, like something moving just out of sight. "We're not alone," I said, voice low, tense. Knew she heard it too. "What do we do?" Her voice was steady, but I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. She'd been studying these woods. She knew something was seriously wrong. "Keep moving," I said, pulling my flashlight from my belt, aiming it into the trees ahead. Beams sliced through the dark, showed nothing but more dark, looming trees. But my gut screamed move. Hairs on the back of my neck prickled, started walking faster, pace quickening to a jog. Sarah fell and stepped beside me, breath coming fast. "Think it's an animal?" she asked. Shook my head. "No, not an animal." Couldn't explain it, but I knew. Whatever was out there wasn't something you could explain away. Air felt too heavy, too thick with a presence that wasn't natural. Felt like something was watching us, waiting for the right moment to what? Make its move. We pushed on. Path to the cabin felt like it was stretching out, getting longer with every step. Forest felt like it was closing in, trees leaning closer, branches like gnarled fingers reaching out. No time to stop. No time to think. Just keep moving. That whisper from earlier still in my head, echoing like a soft chant. "Jacob." Forced the thought down, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Trying not to think about what was lurking behind us. Then, just as we neared the edge of the woods, I heard it. Something that made my blood run cold, a voice. Not the whisper. This was different, low and sharp, full of rage and desperation. "Help me." The scream ripped through the night, shattering the silence. Both Sarah and I froze. Heart hammered in my chest as the scream echoed through the trees. Distant but desperate. Sounded like a man, or maybe a kid. Too distorted by fear to tell, but it was a cry for help. Sarah reacted instantly. No hesitation. Grabbed my arm tight. "We have to go," she said, eyes wide. "We have to help them." Didn't have the heart to tell her it was a trap, but I knew it. This was Blackwood calling. Using our empathy, our instincts to help, to draw us in, make us vulnerable. But Sarah was already moving, legs carrying her towards the sound. Without a second thought, I hesitated. Just for a heartbeat, but something deep inside me, gut feeling, something I couldn't explain, told me to follow. Been in enough bad situations to know when to trust my instincts. And right now, every fiber of my being screamed turn back. But I couldn't leave her alone, not with that scream still ringing in my ears. Jogged after her, catching up just as she reached the edge of the woods. Scream was louder now, more frantic, panic thick in the air. "Where's it coming from?" Sarah whispered, looking around, confused. "Don't know," I said, keeping my voice low. "Stay close." I moved forward, cautious. Hairs on my neck still standing up. Trees were dense here, air colder. Deeper we went, more isolated it felt. No sign of life except for that scream, still echoing through the trees. And then we found it, base of an old oak, barely visible in the dim flashlight beam. The body, or what was left of it. A mangled, limbs twisted at crazy angles, face had torn apart, eyes gouged out, mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. But what grabbed me, what made my stomach heave, wasn't the gore. It was the tree, the oak, symbols scratched into the trunk behind the body. Crude carving, jagged marks, like a warning. Step back, breath catching in my throat. Sarah stood frozen, staring at the body, face white as a sheet. What is this?" She whispered, like she could somehow make sense of it. But there was no sense to be made. Symbols didn't match anything I knew. Like something desperate or insane had tried to leave a message, but it was beyond understanding. "Jake," Sarah's voice trembled. But I didn't have an answer. Scream had stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard it again. Rustling in the trees behind us. Something was moving. Something was watching. Didn't know if it was animal or something worse. But I knew one thing for sure. We were not alone. I turned to Sarah, but the look on her faces, she felt it too. This oppressive air hanging over us now felt like something solid, wrapping its fingers around our throats, suffocating us with its weight. "Jake," she whispered, voice barely there. "We need to go. Now." But even as she said it, I felt my feet planted, rooted to the earth, like I couldn't move. Rustling in the trees was getting louder, closer, distinct now, but not animal sounds. This was something else, deliberate. Took a step back. eyes darting through the shadows, trying to find the source of the movement. But Blackwood had swallowed it up, leaving us with nothing but the eerie silence and the grotesque body at the base of that oak. Mutilation was way too violent for any animal, and those symbols carved into the tree symbols I didn't recognize told me whatever did this wasn't just some beast, something darker. Older, we need to get out of here, I said again, voice more forceful this time. Pulse was racing, adrenaline starting to pump. But before we could even turn around movement, sudden flash of something big darting between the trees. Shadow flickered too fast to make out. Did you see that? I asked, heart pounding in my chest. Sarah didn't answer. Didn't need to. Terror in her eyes said it all. She saw it too. Without another word, we turned and ran. Didn't look back. But the sound of footsteps behind us, too light to be human, kept pace. Whatever was out there, whatever was following, wasn't just stalking. It was toying with us. Playing. I knew this feeling. Being hunted before. Didn't stop running until we hit the edge of the forest. Breathless, trembling. Didn't even know if it was safe here, at the edge of Blackwood, but wasn't about to take any chances. Cabin was closed now, but fear was so sharp, wasn't sure if it even mattered anymore. Blackwood had already sunk its claws in. Could feel it dragging me back into the dark. We were at the clearing now. Small patch of open ground leading to the cabin. But something felt off. Air had shifted. Sky above was too still. Stars too distant. World around us holding its breath. Looked at Sarah, mind racing. We need to get inside. Now, she nodded, silent. Eyes scanning the tree line. Her usual journalist confidence gone. Just raw, naked fear. Mirroring my own. Didn't know if she even grasped how deep we were in it now. Or if she ever would. Stumbled to the cabin. Door creaked open as I shoved it wide. The moment we were inside, I slammed it shut, bolted it. Hands shaking as I fumbled with the lock. Cabin was small, dark, bare bones. Shelter. Supposed to be safe. Didn't feel like it anymore. Sarah collapsed into a chair by the window, breath shallow. Still staring out at the trees, waiting for something to move. Had a feeling she wouldn't relax until dawn. Couldn't blame her, neither could I. I don't understand, she whispered, voice trembling. What the hell was that? Who could do something like that? Didn't have an answer, years out here, away from everything. Never seen anything like this. Never. This was different. Had a feeling it wasn't just the forest hunting us. Rubbed my eyes, trying to clear my head. Fatigue was setting in, but adrenaline was still pumping, keeping me wired. Don't know, I said. Been here a while. Heard stories. But this is something else. Don't think we're dealing with animals anymore. Then what the hell are we dealing with? Sarah's voice was tight. Mix of frustration and terror. Opened my mouth to answer, but words choked in my throat. Like I knew it was out there. Hunting us. But didn't want to say it. Didn't want to believe it. Wind picked up again. Low moan rattling the cabin walls. Almost like Blackwood itself was speaking. Whispering in a language we couldn't understand. Then, just as I was about to speak, the scream. Again, this time louder. Help me! Voice was hoarse, ragged, raw terror. Coming from outside. Froze. Hairs on my neck stood on end. Could feel Sarah's eyes on me waiting for something. Anything. But I was blank. Can't go out there. I whispered, voice barely audible. Whatever it is, it's trying to draw us in. Sarah stood up sudden, face white, but set with this determination. Not just gonna sit here while someone dies out there. Can't leave them. Grabbed her arm, pulled her back. Sarah, listen to me. This isn't a rescue mission. This is what it wants. We go out there, we die. You want that on your conscience. She recoiled, but no time to argue. Scream came again. Closer now. Looter. No longer just a voice. Wail of agony. Raw. Desperate. But something in the pitch didn't sit right. Sounded wrong. Too high. Almost like a kid screaming. But distorted, twisted. Then I heard it, soft, almost an audible sound, shuffle of footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Moving around the cabin. Perimeter. Heart dropped into my stomach. Someone or something was outside. Turned to Sarah, gripped tight on her arm. It's here. Odd door rattled. Once. Twice. Low. Guttural growl followed. Then the whisper. Jake rose. Voice. Familiar. Familiar. Chilling. Couldn't be. But it was. Tried to make sense of it, but mine was a fog of fear. Voice calling my name soft, insistent. Made my skin crawl. Something familiar about it. Haunting. Like a memory I couldn't quite grasp. Face I couldn't place. Sarah grabbed my arm, eyes wide with panic. Who's out there? What is that? Didn't answer. Mouth was dry. Just listen. Every muscle clenched, every nerve screaming. Girl stopped. Heavy silence again. Door rattled. Gentler this time, like a quiet knock. Like someone waiting for an invitation. Swallowed hard, throat tight. Whisper again. Almost like it was speaking directly into my ear, even though no one was there. Jakey, come outside. I know you're listening. Wasn't a question. Command. And it was pulling at something deep inside. Something I couldn't explain. Didn't want to listen. Didn't want to go outside. But the pull damn pull hard to ignore. Sarah backed away from the door, trembling. You have to make it stop. I don't know what this is, but I don't think we're going to survive this. Door shook harder now. Whispering turned into a voice. One I knew. One that sent a shard of ice straight through my heart. Jake, you left me. Turned to Sarah, heart sinking. It's my father. She stared, eyes full of confusion, fear. What? Your father? He died long time ago. Last person I expected to hear from. Voice cracked. Had to keep talking. It's not really him. Can't be. Sarah was silent, just staring at the door, like waiting for it to open on its own. But I knew better. Knew not to trust whatever was on the other side. Gritted my teeth, fighting down the rising panic. Needed to do something. Anything. Sitting here wasn't going to cut it. Air felt thick, the weight of whatever was on the other side of that door. Whisper again. This time louder. Jake, come home. Legs trembled. Hadn't heard that word in years. Not since Dad used to call me that when I was a kid. Home used to mean something safe. Solid. Now, just reminded me of the past. Mistakes, failures. You can't go out there? Sarah whispered, voice shaking. It's not him. You know that, right? Nodded, but felt like the room was closing in. Walls shrinking. Air thickening. Could almost feel the weight of blackwood pressing against us. Ancient hunger reaching out, calling us to the dark. Without thinking, I turned to the window. Moonlight barely cut through the trees, but enough to show the outline of something moving just beyond the tree line. Shadow. Tall. Way too tall for a human. Creeping closer, every second. Air colder. Trees rustled even though there was no wind. Sarah, I think it's here, I whispered, voice barely a breath. She looked at me, eyes wide. Pure terror. What is it, Jake? What is out there? Before I could answer, another knock on the door. Louder this time, like it was trying to break through the wood. Whispering stopped. Then, low guttural sound. Door started to crack. Step back, heart hammering. Wouldn't need to leave. Now. Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but before she could get a word out, violent CRH. Door exploded inwards. Splinters flying everywhere. Standing in the doorway, something I could barely comprehend. Not a man. Not even human. Thing. Twisted, contorted. Skin pale, sickly. Stretched tight over bones that were too long, too sharp. Face twisted into a grin. Eyes black as coal, gleaming in the dark. Mouth filled with jagged teeth that seemed to stretch impossibly wide. But the worst part, the thing that made my blood run ice cold, its face. It wasn't just a monster. It was a mask. Beneath it, I saw my father's face. Withered, decayed, but unmistakable. Creature grins again. Heard the voice I'd feared so much, but twisted now. A natural, hollow laugh. Jake, I've been waiting for you. Room spun. Mind trying to catch up. Wasn't just some forest legend. Some ancient evil. Something else entirely. Something that had been here long before me. Something that wanted to take me. Running. I shouted at Sarah, voice raw with desperation. She didn't hesitate, bolted for the back door. But I was frozen, caught in the creature's gaze. Feet wouldn't move, body felt like lid. Mind screaming fight, do something. But couldn't. Creature stepped forward. Feet dragging like the earth itself was resisting. Grin widened. Sound of its breath echoed in the cabin like a low growl. Then, footsteps behind me. Sarah, she'd made it outside. Creature's head turned natural towards the back door, hesitated. Just for a moment. That was all I needed. Ran. Didn't know where. Didn't know if I was running to safety or deeper into its grasp. Just ran. Everything I had. Heard it behind me. Dragging feet. Breath hot on my neck. Didn't look back. Took hours. Finally found my way back to the edge of Blackwood. Moonlight breaking through the trees. Cold air seemed to clear my head. Couldn't hear it anymore. Creature, whatever it was. Stopped chasing. Wasn't sure if it stopped following. Stumbled to the road, hands shaking. Didn't know where Sarah was. Breath ragged. Bodhi etching. Turned back, trying to see the cabin in the distance. Just darkness. Blackwood had swallowed it whole, and that's when I knew I'd left something behind. Something terrible. And it was still out there. Waiting. Alright, so name's Ethan, but everyone just calls me Red. I'm pushing 40, and for the last 5 years, I've been living way off the grid. Like, really out there. I'm talking Black Rock Desert, Nevada. Moved out here to ditch everything the world, people, the constant freaking noise. Turns out the desert ain't as quiet as you think, but in a weird way, I dig it more. Just the wind, the absolute silence, and the way the land just stretches out forever, like you can see the earth's bones. There's a kind of peace in it, you know. But peace can be a total lie. This was late November last year, 2023. The wind was kicking up dust devils, and the sky had this heavy orange tint, the kind that makes the desert feel even more cut off, like you're the last dude on the planet. That's exactly how it felt when I saw them on the horizon. I was chilling outside my shack, cleaning my AR-15. Yeah, out in the desert, you gotta be ready. This place has a way of making you feel tiny, like you're nothing. Most days, my only company was the occasional coyote sniffing around my camp before vanishing back into the sagebrush. Didn't bug me, I was used to it. But that day, something felt off. Just this weird gut feeling, like when you know something's wrong but can't put your finger on it. Instinct, I guess. I stood up, slung my rifle over my shoulder, and scanned the horizon. That's when I saw them, two figures walking in the distance. Silhouettes against the dusty sky. Too far to make out faces, but they were definitely heading my way. I set my rifle down and started walking towards the shack, eyes glued to them. I ain't dumb. People don't just wander into the Black Rock without a damn good reason, especially when the weather's turning to crap. Something about how they moved, no packs, no gear, told me they weren't ready for this place. I ducked inside, grabbed my binoculars, and checked them out. Rough-looking dudes, scruffy. One in a beat-up leather jacket, the other in a ratty hoodie. They weren't rushing, but they were dead set on heading straight for my camp. Had a choice to make. Pack up and run, maybe run right into whatever the hell these guys were about, or stick it out and see what they wanted. I stayed. When they finally got close, I was standing on my porch, hand on the grip of my .44. Leather jacket guy called out, "You live here." Voice was gravelly, kind of drawly, like he hadn't talked in days. I just nodded, didn't say a word. My silence made him twitchy, but he kept going. "We need some help," he said. "Been walking for days. You got a phone or anything? Need to make a call." I shook my head. No phone. And I don't usually help strangers out here. Hoodie guy glanced over his shoulder, eyes all jumpy. Looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. "Just need shelter," Leather jacket said. "No trouble. Just water, maybe a bite. Please." I stared them down for a long minute, trying to read their faces, their moves. Something about them felt off, but then again, maybe it was just the desert messing with my head, making me paranoid. I was used to being alone, and the idea of sharing my space, even for a night, felt wrong. "Fine," I said finally, "but just for tonight. No funny business." "Got it." They nodded real quick, and as they shuffled towards my shack, I couldn't shake this feeling that something was seriously wrong. That night, we sat around my fire, the three of us. Didn't offer much, just some canned beans, water, granola bars. Fire crackled, wind howled in the distance, but those guys were quiet. Too quiet. Weird how they barely spoke to each other. Leather jacket Mark, he said his name did most of the talking, but his eyes were always flicking around, never really landing on anything. Hoodie guy Dave barely said a peep. Just stared into the fire, face like a stone. We didn't get into why they were out here. They didn't say where they were from, or what they were running from, and I didn't ask. Out here, you meet people who don't want to be found. Learned a long time ago to respect that. But something told me these weren't just guys passing through. They were hiding from something. Someone, maybe. Didn't know yet. But I'd find out soon enough. It wasn't until the middle of the night that I knew for sure something was jacked up. Woke up to movement outside the shack. Wind at first, but then I heard rustling, gravel crunching. My dog Boone, low growl in his throat, hackles up. Grabbed my rifle from the corner, headed for the door, Boone right behind me, sniffing the air. I eased the door open, peeked out. There, by the edge of the firelight, was Dave, just standing there staring out into the desert like he was waiting for something. Someone? Stiff posture, unnatural. Didn't take long to realize he wasn't alone. Something or someone was out there with him. I stepped out into the night, Boone at my side, rifle ready. Cold air bit at my skin. Stars just watched, cold and distant. Called out to Dave, but he didn't react. That's when I heard it. Low whisper. From the shadows. Too faint to understand, but it was there, chilling the air. Boone barked. Sudden. Sharp for on end. Before I could even blink, Dave turned, eyes wide glassy. Mouth hanging open, slack wrong. Didn't speak, didn't even look at me, just started walking. Towards the darkness. Towards the cliffs past my camp, I shouted, but he didn't stop. No choice. Followed him. By the time I reached the cliff edge, it was too late. Dave had vanished into the night, footsteps swallowed by the wind. Boone stood at the edge, sniffing, but nothing. No sign of him. Desert had just swallowed him whole. That was the first sign. Something was horribly, horribly wrong. Didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Desert was too quiet, too still after Dave just evaporated. My brain wouldn't shut off, replaying every second Dave's vacant stare. Those dead eyes as he walked towards the cliffs, that creepy whisper that iced my blood. Kept telling myself I'd find him. He couldn't have gone far. But the desert, man, it's got a way of just erasing people, like they were never even there. Told myself I'd wait till morning to search again. Boone stayed glued to my side, still freaked out from whatever the hell happened. Could feel his anxiety, his tension in the way he paced around the fire, tail tucked, ears flat. Even Boone, who's seen some messed up stuff, knew something was wrong. When dawn finally cracked, I grabbed my gear. No sign of Dave anywhere near the shack. No tracks, no disturbed dirt, nothing to show he'd even walked through the sagebrush, like he just blinked out of existence. Mark had gone quiet too. Found him slumped by the fire, staring at the ground, jacket pulled tight like he was trying to disappear. Our eyes met, but he didn't say a word. What happened to Dave? I asked, voice sharper than I meant. Mark hesitated, rubbed the back of his neck, looked real uncomfortable. Dunno, man, he mumbled. We were just by the fire, and he got up, said something about hearing voices. His voice trailed off, eyes darting towards the empty desert. Trade calling him, but he didn't listen. Didn't make sense. I'd been awake on edge, heard no voices. Would have heard something if anyone else was out there, especially in the desert night silence. Looked around, scanned the land. Cliffs were only a few hundred yards. No way Dave could have gotten there that fast. Decided to check the cliffs again, dragged Mark with me. Boone trailed behind, sniffing the ground like he was trying to piece together a puzzle. We reached the cliffs in silence. Expected footprints, a trail leading to the rocks. Nothing. Just barren land, cracked earth, windswept sagebrush. Mark was getting jumpier by the minute, pacing back and forth. We gotta leave, he muttered. This place ain't right. Told you, man, I didn't sign up for this. Don't want to be out here no more. Ignored him, still scanning the ground. Boone sniffed around the base of the cliffs, then froze, body rigid, ears pricked, low growl. Knelt down next to him, trying to see what he'd found. That's when I saw them. Tracks. Fresh, barely there in the soft dirt near the rocks. But not normal footprints. Too wide, too deep. Like something heavy had dragged itself along the ground. Reached out to touch them, but before I could, a voice cut through the silence. You found them. Spun around, rifle up. Standing at the cliff edge, face white as bone, eyes wide with fear, was Sarah. Yes, Sarah. Somehow she'd gotten here without me even hearing her approach. Sarah. I said, catching my breath. What the hell are you doing here? I heard something, she stammered, voice shaky. Been following the trail for hours. Couldn't sleep. Something's wrong? Ethan. Something's out here, something's been taking people. Stepped towards her, trying to calm her down. What are you talking about? What trail? She glanced over her shoulder, jumpy, like someone was watching. I've been looking into disappearances around here. People gone missing for years. It's not random. There's a pattern. Pulled out a notebook from her pack. Shoved it at me. Pages filled with notes, dates, names. One thing jumped out, old woman skinwalker dar. She's the one, Sarah whispered. Locals call her that. Skinwalker Black Rock. She takes people, Ethan. Feeds off them. Stared at her, brain trying to catch up. Feeds off them. What the hell does that mean? Sarah looked at me, eyes wide. Something in them I couldn't place fear, yeah, but also desperation and something darker. Not just kills them. She shook her head, couldn't finish. Takes their bones, their essence, their life. Felt the hairs on my neck prickle. Bones. That word echoed in my head. Not the first time I'd heard it, not in this place. And now, after what I'd seen in the desert, I wasn't so sure it was just some campfire story. We stood there, silent, Boone still growling, teeth bared. Didn't know what he was reacting to. Maybe he sensed something I couldn't. I don't buy this crap, Mark said, voice tight with fear, breaking the silence. Book what I'm seeing. It ain't normal. We gotta get out of here. No, I agree, I said, but the more I thought, the more I knew running wouldn't fix anything. Tracks, the bad feeling in my gut, Dave vanishing wasn't coincidence. Something was out here, and it wasn't gonna stop till it got what it wanted. We headed back to the shack, my mind racing. Couldn't shake the image of Dave's face, that empty look as he walked into the night. Knew he hadn't just wandered off. He'd been taken. And the more I thought, the more I wondered maybe I was next. Didn't talk much on the way back to the shack. All of us lost in our heads. Sarah kept her distance from Mark, eyes darting at him every few seconds. Couldn't blame her. Something about him just felt wrong. More than just him being freaked out. Got back to the shack and I went straight to work, fortifying the place. Checked windows, bolted the door. Made sure Boone was inside, close to the fire. Mark sat outside, back against the shack wall, eyes glued to the horizon. Sarah stayed by the fire, but kept a wide berth from him. Isolation was hitting hard again. Out here, you lose track of time, forget the world even exists. But now, felt like everything was closing in. Couldn't shake the feeling that whatever took Dave was still watching, waiting. Mark finally spoke, voice shaky. What's the plan, Ethan? You've been out here longer. You know this place. Think we can survive this? Didn't answer right away. Truth was, I didn't know. Lived alone in the desert for years, but never faced anything like this. Wasn't just about surviving the elements. Wasn't wildlife or bad weather. This was something else. Something older than the desert itself. Don't know, I said finally, voice quiet. But we can't leave yet. Gotta figure out what happened to Dave. Stop whatever's happening. Sarah stood up, face serious. Ethan, I've been digging into this place's history. Found records of disappearances. All the same pattern. People vanish in the desert, and the ones who make it back, they're never the same. They talk about a woman. Old woman who lives out here. Turned to face her, brow furrowed. Who is she? Called old woman skinwalker. Sarah said, some say she's a witch. Been preying on people for centuries. Takes them, changes them, makes them into something else, something worse. Cold shiver ran down my spine. Heard the name before, whispered in town, always brushed it off as local folklore. But now with Dave gone, the weirdness piling up, wasn't so sure anymore. What does she want with us? Mark asked, voice desperate. Why us? What did we do? Sarah's eyes widened, shook her head. Don't know, but I've been looking at the signs. She doesn't take just anyone. She's selective. Chooses people who are lost, desperate. Takes what she needs, then leaves. I turned back to the fire, mind racing. If old woman Skinwalker was real, we were already in her crosshairs. Desert wasn't just a place, it was a trap. Designed to lure in the weak, the lost, the broken. Mark, Sarah, I said, voice steady now. We gotta stick together, no matter what. If we're gonna make it through this, gotta trust each other. Mark nodded, but his eyes were still hollowed out with fear. Could see it in him, same fear that was growing in me since Dave vanished. But it wasn't just fear anymore. Something deeper, darker. Something we couldn't outrun. Set up watch that night. Mark insisted on first shift, though he was barely holding it together. Didn't blame him. We were all on edge. Desert was too still, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Sarah and I sat by the fire, didn't talk. Nothing left to say. We both knew. Knew we were being hunted. Middle of the night. Boone's frantic barking woke me. Harsh, desperate, like he was trying to warn me about something huge. Grabbed my rifle, bolted outside. Boone was already charging towards the woods behind the shack, Barking like crazy, followed him, heart hammering. Air was freezing, wind cutting through my clothes, but Boone kept going, deeper into the trees, closer to the cliffs. Boone, I yelled. Voice strained, but he didn't stop. Just running, paws thudding on the ground for standing on end. Finally caught up to him near the edge of a ravine. He stopped, sniffing the air, tail tucked, eyes wide with terror. And that's when I saw it. Figure, tall, gaunt, covered in rags, standing at the bottom of the ravine, back to us. Wasn't moving, but I could feel it. Presence like a weight pressing down, watching us. Watching, raise my rifle, hands shaking, but before I could get a shot, the figure turned, and I saw its face. Wasn't human. Face twisted, stretched, skin pulled tight over a skull too big for its own damn skin. Eyes were empty holes, black pits. Mouth hung open in a wide, toothless grin. Stumbled back, almost fell. Boone whimpered beside me, eyes locked on the creature. Then, just like that, it was gone. 1 second there, next vanished. Like it was never real. Stood frozen, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Ethan. Sarah's voice cut through the fog in my brain, running towards me, eyes wide with panic. What was that? What did you see? Couldn't answer. Couldn't even find the words. Didn't know how to explain it, how to make sense of what I just saw. Desert was alive. A live in a way I could understand. We need to go, I said, finally, voice shaky, forcing the words out. No. By the time we got back to the shack, sun was starting to rise, all of us exhausted, shaken to the core. Boone still on edge, pacing, senses on overdrive. Knew that thing would be back. Could feel it in my bones, hunting us, waiting for the right moment. Sarah didn't ask questions. She knew what I'd seen. We both knew. We were out of time. Desert was coming for us. But as we packed, trying to make a plan to escape, I heard it. Whispers, faint at first, then louder. Couldn't tell where it was coming from, wind, or something else. Then I heard a name. My name, Ethan. Voice whispered it. Wasn't the wind, wasn't the desert, it was her. Old woman skinwalker was calling me, and I knew then it was too late. Whisper of my name hung in the air, lingering like a shadow. Wasn't the wind, wasn't the desert. Old woman skinwalker. Froze, hand clamped around the rifle, weighed a cold reminder of the terror closing in. Ethan. Voice again clearer now, but still distant, like calling from the edge of the world. Soft, almost sweet, but something wrong with it. Sickening. Knew whatever took Dave, whatever dragged me into this nightmare, was just out of sight. Boone growled low, bristling, teeth bared. He'd been jumpy all night, now it was clear why. He could sense it too. Sarah by the fire, eyes locked on me, waiting for a plan. When the whisper hit her ears, her face changed. Not just scared anymore, terrified. Ethan, she whispered, voice trembling. What is that? Couldn't answer. Words wouldn't come. Every instinct screamed to run, leave this place, never look back. But I knew it wouldn't work. Desert wouldn't let us go that easy. Old woman skinwalker wouldn't let us go, voice again. Closer now. Could feel it like cold breath on my neck. Come to me, it crooned. Words sweet like poison. I'm waiting, Ethan. Turned to Sarah, mind racing. We need to leave now. But as I said it, something in the air shifted. Ground trembled under our feet. Temperature dropped. Sudden, biting cold cut through my jacket, froze me to the bone. Boone whimpered, tail between legs, backing away from the shack. Grabbed Sarah's arm, dragged her towards the truck. Get in the truck now. Mark hadn't said a word since last night, but now he was standing at the edge of the firelight, face white, eyes wide. What's happening? He croaked, voice hoarse. It's her, I said, barely keeping it together. Old woman skinwalker. She's coming. But before we reached the truck, something caught my eye. Far edge of camp, just beyond the shadows of the trees. Saw her, old woman skinwalker. Too tall, body bent wrong, angles all messed up. Face gaunt, hollow, skin stretched tight over bones way too big for her frame. Eyes were black holes, empty. And her mouth stretched wide in a sick grin, teeth too sharp, too many. Fingers no, claws twitched. Reaching for us fast, too fast, made my stomach churn, froze, couldn't move. Mark stepped forward, voice shaky but loud. What do we do now? Looking at me, waiting for something, anything to save us, but I had nothing. No plan. Run, I choked out. Bolted for the truck, but before we could get there, ground cracked open. Earth split with a deafening roar. Wind picked up, howling in my ears, drowning everything out. Load screech echoed, like the desert itself was screaming, hungry for us. Pushed Sarah into the truck, shoved her towards the passenger seat. Mark scrambled in behind me, fumbling with the keys, hands shaking so bad I thought he dropped them. Seconds from escape, but the air shifted again. Deep, crushing weight pressed down, hard to breathe. Whispers louder in air, echoing off the canyon walls. You can't escape, I'll always find you. Truck engine roared to life. Mark slammed it into gear, but something blocked our path. Figure, Dave. But not Dave. Body twisted, skin pale, stretched tight over bones, eyes black. Mouth grinning, same sick grin as old woman skinwalker. And then I saw it. Mark on his neck. Black, jagged symbol burned into his skin like a brand. No, I gasped. It's not him. Mark floored it, but Dave thing moved impossible fast. Hands claws slammed against the windshield, cracking it, sickening sound. Grabbed the rifle from the passenger seat, fired. Shot rang out, night exploded. But Dave didn't flinch, grin just widened. Then, horrible screech, creature lunged. Impact sent the truck spinning, crashing into a boulder. World went black. When I came to, truck was upside down. Head throbbing. Everything blurry. Heard Sarah calling my name, voice frantic, but far away. Ethan. Sounded so distant. Blinked, trying to clear my vision. Then I saw it, Boone. Lying still outside the truck. Body twisted wrong. Formatted with blood. Couldn't breathe. Tried to move, body wouldn't work. World spinning dizzy, weak. Heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Each step like a drumbeat against my chest. Forced myself to look up. There she was. Old woman skinwalker. Smiling at me, mouth stretching impossibly wide. Sound of her laughter scraped against my mind like nails on glass. You belong to me now. She whispered, voice low, rasping hiss. You all belong to me. Last thing I remember was her reaching down. Long, bony fingers wrapping around my throat. Hey everyone, long-time lurker, first-time poster. Gotta share something that still messes with my head even years later. It happened back in March of 2021. I'm Liam Walker, 32, ex-park ranger. Now I try to make a living snapping photos of the outdoors. Always been more at home in the wild than in any city, you get it. This was supposed to be a chill trip. Just a long weekend to Yosemite. Needed to clear my head, get some shots for a magazine jig. Famous last words, right? Nothing's ever simple. My girlfriend Sarah came along. She was a journalist, always chasing local legends, especially the creepy stuff. Yosemite, with its old stories, was right up her alley. She was digging into this thing the locals called the Lost Path, a section of the park where hikers had just vanished over the years. Whispers of curses, something unnatural in the woods. Sarah, naturally, was all over it, believed in all the stuff most people write off as campfire tales. That was Sarah. Then there was Ben, my best friend. Ex-Marine, survivalist to the core. Duke was just a nickname from his military days. Everyone called him Ben. He wasn't about ghosts, logic, reason, and a good knife. That was Ben's religion. If things went south, and they always seemed to around me, Ben was the guy you wanted with you. Packed enough gear to survive a zombie apocalypse in his rucksack, and could start a fire with, like 2 damp twigs. Solid dude. We rolled into Yosemite Friday afternoon, sun already dipping low, those long shadows stretching across the valley. Set up camp near this busted, up old ranger station, been abandoned for ages. Perfect view of Half Dumb, though. Figured I'd get some killer sunset shots, maybe catch some wildlife. Sarah, being Sarah, was instantly off exploring, notebook in hand. She'd been researching the Lost Path for weeks, determined to figure out what happened to those missing hikers. Write some big expose, probably. Wasn't sure she was ready for what she might find, but telling Sarah not to do something was like telling a river not to flow Ophil. Ben, meanwhile, wasn't buying in any ghost stories. He was all about camp setup, firewood stacked high, perimeter checked. He respected the wilderness, knew it was dangerous on its own terms, but he wasn't scared of boogeymen, just knew how to handle himself. Kept him calm, I guess. Hour or so before dark, we were settling in. Sarah was still out there, somewhere in the woods, probably poking around for clues. Fire crackling, pine smell thick in the air. Ben had brought his guitar, so we were taking turns strumming, passing a bottle of whiskey I'd packed. This was our tradition, these trips. Starting to feel that familiar outdoor comfort, you know. Peaceful quiet, cool evening air, wind in the trees. But something felt off that night. Started with Sarah being gone too long. She usually wandered, but she'd always be back before dark. Now shadows were getting long and no sign of her. Called out her name, just got wind back. Ben noticed it too. Gave me this look, brow furrowed. Probably chasing some legend. He muttered, but his voice didn't have that Ben-level conviction. He was worried too. Grabbed my flashlight, headed towards the woods, calling Sarah's name. Trees closed in fast, branches twisting like skeletal fingers against the fading light. Deeper I went, heavier the forest felt, pressing down. Suffocating quiet. Called again, Sarah! Nothing. Air felt thick, heavy with something else. Not just normal forest night sounds. Too still, too quiet. Then, in the distance, I heard it. A kid's laugh. Froze solid. Wasn't Sarah. Something else. Too high-pitched, too unsettling. Laugh echoed through the trees, chilled down my spine. Rushed towards the sound, heart hammering. Pushing through underbrush. And then I saw her. Little girl. Standing in a clearing back to me, facing deeper woods. Hair long, tangled. Skin so pale it looked translucent in the fading light. Barefoot. Didn't move when I called out. She lost. She turned. Face pale like she'd never seen sunlight. Eyes black as coal, staring blankly. No recognition, no emotion, just darkness. Something was wrong, took a step forward. Where's Sarah? Tried to keep my voice steady. Girl didn't answer, just pointed deeper into the trees. Then turned, started walking away. Movement stiff, almost robotic, like some puppet on strings. Followed her, couldn't take my eyes off this weird kid. Felt like being pulled into some kind of trance, couldn't resist. Then I heard it again, Sarah's voice, faint but clear. Help me, Liam. Came from ahead beyond the trees. Panic spiked. Panic Sarah. I yelled, but the girl kept walking, like she hadn't heard a thing. Followed, heart racing, something screaming in my gut this wasn't right. But I couldn't stop. Not when Sarah needed me. Girl stopped in another clearing, caught up to her. The moment I did, she turned back. She needs you more than you do, she whispered. Voice wasn't hers, voice I had heard before. Sarah's. Froze again. Girl took a step closer, eyes widening. She's waiting, and before I could even blink, felt something know, someone grabbed my arm. Yanked me backwards into darkness, not Sarah. Fought, but the grip tightened. Then everything went black. Don't know how long I was out. Head was pounding, world spinning. For a second, thought it was all a nightmare. But then the throbbing in my side, the cold night air biting my skin, nope, real. Forced my eyes open. Forest was pitch black. Trees looming like silent watchers. Distant rustling of leaves, whisper of wind, but nothing else. No Sarah, no creepy little girl, nothing. Scrambled to my feet, legs shaky, like I hadn't walked in days. Breath coming in short, panic gasps. Flashlight gone. Lost in whatever the hell just happened. But then I saw it. Ground under me was torn up, dirt all messed up, like something someone had been dragged. Knelt down, fingers brushing the dirt, and that's when I saw it, blood. Not much at first, just a few drops, but enough. Enough to confirm the icy dread already in my gut. Sarah, staggered forward following the trail, eyes glued to the ground. Blood led me deeper into the woods, winding around gnarled roots of ancient trees. Then it just stopped, abruptly, base of a small hill, and then I heard it again, Sarah's voice. Help me, Liam. Faint. Barely a whisper on the wind, but unmistakable. Panic surge. She was close. Had to be. Sprint up the hill, thorns tearing at my jeans. Didn't even feel it. Heart hammering, every step felt like forever. Couldn't like this. Not reach the top. And fuck. Saw something that made my stomach heave. Figure kneeling in the dirt. Sarah, or what looked like Sarah. Stumbled towards her, calling her name. Didn't move. Didn't even twitch. Back to me, hands limp in her lap. Faint moonlight on her pale face. Eyes shut tight, lips pressed thin. Something was wrong. No life in her posture. No Sarah Ness. Reached out, shaking her gently. Sarah, can you hear me? Nothing. No response. Heart sank. This wasn't my Sarah. Not the woman I loved. Grabbed her shoulders, turned her around. That's when I saw her eyes. Wide open now. But not hers. Black. Like the void. Like that girl. Pupils gone, swallowed by darkness. Stumbled back, chest tight with dread. Clara, I whispered again, voice shaking. Her lips curled into a smile, but not her smile. Too long. She's waiting, Sarah said, voice flat, monotone. Blood ran cold. She's waiting for you, Liam. Repeated, smile never faltering. Took a step back. Mind racing. This wasn't Sarah. Didn't know what it was, but it wasn't her. This thing had taken her, twisted her into something else. Had to get her away from whatever dark force had done this. But how? Couldn't just leave her here like this. Stepped forward again, hands shaking, reaching for her. Touched her arm. Something inside me just froze. Ground beneath my feet trembled. Low. Guttural growl vibrated through the earth. Air grew thick, heavy with presence. Something malevolent, something ancient. Trees seemed to lean in closer, shadows shifting, unnatural. And then, from behind Sarah, something else stepped into the moonlight. Maisie. Little girl, standing there, staring at me with those dark, empty eyes. Face still pale, lifeless. Tiny hands held out in front of her, like she was beckoning. No, I whispered, shaking my head. Disbelief. No, not again. Sarah, or whatever this thing was that looked like her, tilted her head slowly. You have to come with her, Liam, she said. She's waiting. Cold sweat down my spine. This wasn't some lost kid in the woods. This was something way worse, something ancient, waiting for someone dumb enough to wander into its trap. Maisie took a step forward, feet silent on the ground. And as she did, I heard a voice in my head, not my own, something darker, more powerful. Come closer, Liam. Let her have you. You belong to me. Shook my head violently, trying to clear the fog in my brain. This wasn't real, couldn't be. But the pull of Maisie's presence, the sheer force of it, too much. Like every part of me was being drawn to her. No choice but to obey. Sarah, I cried out, voice cracking. Sarah, fight to me. Come back to no response. Sarah's eyes still wide, smile still wrong. Didn't even flinch when I shouted her name. Backed away slowly. Maisie kept moving closer, tiny feet making no sound. Smile widened, showing teeth. Sharp, jagged teeth. Way too big for her little mouth. Turned and ran. Had to get out of there. Had to escape whatever this was before it swallowed me whole. But as I turned to flee, heard the voice again. Same one from my head. You can't escape me, Liam. Not ever. The forest seemed to close in. Trees twisting into shapes that weren't natural. Branches clawing at my skin. Stumbled, legs giving out. Felt cold fingers of fear tighten around my chest, squeezing the air out of my lungs. But couldn't stop. Couldn't let it get me. Pushed forward, ignoring the ache in my body. The pain radiating from my side where I'd been slashed earlier. Blood dripping down my shirt, didn't care. Just had to get away. Had to survive. Didn't stop running until I couldn't hear Maisie's voice in my head anymore. Until the forest behind me was just a blur, and the only sound was my own ragged breathing. Collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, heart hammering. But in the back of my mind, one thought kept repeating. She's still waiting. Don't know how long I sat there in the darkness. Weight of everything pressing down, like a suffocating fog. Mind spinning, trying to piece together shattered fragments of what just happened. Made no sense. The girl Maisie. The thing that had taken Sarah. None of it felt real. Couldn't be real. Had to be dreaming, right? But I knew better. Pain in my side, blood still sticky, sick feeling in my gut, all too real. Wasn't dreaming. This was happening. Night stretched on forever. Forest eerily silent now. Wind sounds, animal noises gone. Just the rustle of my clothes as I shifted, breaking the stillness. Couldn't stay out here in the woods. Couldn't keep running. But couldn't go back to that clearing. Not with Sarah, Thing, and Maisie out there. Had to think. Had to have a plan. Pushed myself up, ignoring the ache in my legs. The throbbing in my side. Stumbled in the direction I thought would lead back to camp. Wasn't sure where I even was anymore, how far I'd run. Trees all looked the same. Twisted branches reaching up like crooked fingers in the pale moonlight. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every rustle in the corner of my eye made me jump. Forest was alive, and it was watching me. Moved as fast as I could, trying to shake the feeling of being followed. Wasn't alone, knew in my bones. Deeper I went, trail blurred, ground uneven. Forest floor thick with undergrowth. Felt like walking in circles. Didn't dare stop long enough to look back. Had to find Ben. He'd know what to do. He'd help me get out of this mess. We trained together. He always saw things clear when I was freaking out. Reached for my phone in my pocket. Dumbus. No signal. Panic simmering under the surface started to boil over. Throat tightened. Chest constricting with every step. Ben, I thought, desperate. Where are you? Felt like hours, stumbling through the dark. Then, finally, spotted something familiar. Old, half-rotted tree. Marked the edge of our campsite. Heart skipped a beat. Didn't stop running. Pushed through the brush, fighting down the panic clawing at my chest. Reached the camp. And empty. Ben's pack still sitting by the fire pit abandoned. Fire long burned out, ashes cold, still. No sign of Ben. No sign of Sarah. Nothing. Just the empty campsite. Remnants of our once comfortable weekend trip. Ben. Voice cracked as I called his name. Silence answered. Searched the area frantic now. Pushing through underbrush, checking behind trees, praying they'd come back here. Maybe just stepped away for a minute. But nothing. World eerily quiet. Just the rustling trees, my own panic breathing. And then I saw it. Flash of movement in the distance. Too fast to be human. Froze. Heart stopped for a second. Thought I saw a flash of a pale face in the shadows. Little girl. Maisie. No. Couldn't go after her again. Couldn't, then I heard something else. Voices. Low, muffled. Liam. Turned towards the sound, chest tight that voice. Sarah's voice. Sarah. I called again, louder this time. Feet moving before my brain caught up. Almost running now. Desperate need to find her, overriding everything else. Sound of her voice pulling me forward, urging me deeper into the forest. Deeper into the unknown. Trees seemed to part as I moved. Path clearing like the forest itself was opening up for me. Almost there. Could hear Sarah's voice clearer now. Pulse quickened. Reach feet faltered. Stopped dead. Sickening realization hit my gut like a punch. Clearing was empty. No Sarah. No Maisie. Forest still. Night unnaturally quiet. But then I saw something that made my stomach churn. A body. It was Ben, his body crumpled in the center of the clearing. Face pale, eyes wide open, staring into nothing. Blood stained the ground under him, a dark pool soaking into the earth. Throat slashed. No mistaking it. Stumbled forward, heart hammering, bile rising in my throat. How had I missed him? But there he was, dead, center of the clearing, murdered. Part of me wanted to run. Escape, pretend this wasn't happening. Couldn't. Needed answers, had to understand. Knelt beside him, reaching for a pulse, but knew was pointless. Going. Suddenly rustling behind me. Snap of a twig. Whirled around, hand reaching for the knife at my belt. Someone there, not Ben. Not Sarah. Her, Maisie. Standing at the edge of the clearing. Small, pale face in the moonlight. Eyes still black. But now something else in them. Something ancient. Something cruel. She's waiting. She said, same monotone voice. Stepping towards me, tiny feet silent on the forest floor. Took a step back, breath shallow gasps. What do you want from me? Maisie tilted her head like considering the question. Said nothing. Just pointed to the ground, where Ben's body lay. You're next, she whispered. World seemed to tilt. Darkness around me deepened, shadows pressing in. Turned away from her, legs moving on instinct. Had to leave. Couldn't face whatever this was. Not alone. But before I could take another step, something cold gripped my arm. Jerked away, but the grip tightened. Looked blood ran cold. Sarah. There. Eyes still black, face still too pale. Kneeling beside Ben's body, hands tracing the blood on the ground. Sarah. I whispered. No answer. Lips parted in that wide, unnatural smile. She's waiting, she repeated. Voice like ice. And then something changed. Air shifted. Forest seemed to close in tighter. Could feel it. Presence. Something darker than either of them. Something that had been waiting for me since I stepped into these woods. Too late. Already too late. Last thing I heard was Sarah's voice. Then black. Woke up to absolute darkness. Disoriented. Confused. Sharp, acrid taste of fear in my mouth, gasping for air. Chest tight like something heavy was crushing me. Eyes flickered open, but just blackness. No moon, no stars. Just void. Was I even still in the forest? Trapped somewhere else entirely. Tried to move. Limbs felt like lead. Sluggish. Stone. Panic surged again, fought to sit up, but body wouldn't cooperate. Like someone was holding me down. Keeping me pinned. Then I heard the whisper. Deep in the darkness. Soft, like a breath on the wind, but unmistakable. You can't escape. Froy Solier. Maisie. But not just Maisie anymore. Something else layered in. Something sinister. Blinked hard trying to focus. Slowly. Shapes started to form in the blackness. Head spinning, couldn't tell if it was real or some kind of waking nightmare. But as shapes sharpened, sickening lurch in my gut. Surrounded. Sarah. Face standing there, face too pale, black eyes locked on mine. Mouth twisted in that horrible smile. Not alone. Maisie beside her, small form casting an eerie, spectral glow in the dim, fading light. And then others. Figures just beyond reach of the light. Faces twisted, unrecognizable. Eyes black, empty, soulless. Watching me, could feel their gaze boring into me, waiting. Struggled again, this time managed to push myself up trembling, heart thundering. Sarah. I choked out, voice weak. Please, what's happening? Where are we? Sarah didn't respond. Instead, Maisie stepped forward, tiny feet silent. She's waiting, repeated voice hollow echo. She needs you, Liam. Wanted to scream, beg her to stop, fight whatever dark thing had taken Sarah. Words caught in my throat, every instinct screaming run, but paralyzed. Couldn't escape. Trapped, Maisie's smile widened as she stepped closer, and then I realized, horror twisting my insides. Forest around me changed. Trees that had towered over me, now twisted, grotesque blackened shapes. Limbs reached out like claws, bark slick, pulsing like alive. Air thick, heavy with something ancient, malevolent. Felt like the forest itself was part of this dark force, waiting for me. Glanced back at Sarah. Still hadn't moved. Emptiness in her eyes sent ice down my spine. Wasn't the woman I loved. Wasn't Sarah. Backed away, shaking my head. No, this isn't real. You're not her. You're not Sarah. Smile on Sarah's face just widened. She's waiting. Maisie whispered again. Voice now a chorus of echoes, like more voices joined hers. Turned, panic rising. Had to escape this nightmare. But before I could move, cold hand clamped on my wrist. Spun around. Sarah. Grip like ice, fingers digging into my skin. Face inches from mine. Smell of decay on her breath. She's waiting. She said again, voice hollow, devoid of any trace of Sarah. You are what she's been waiting for. Recoiled, trying to rip myself free. Hold unbreakable, like her very essence replaced by something else. Something evil, something ancient. Could feel the presence all around now. Malevolent force that had been watching since I stepped into the woods. Everywhere. In the trees, ground, air I breathed. Couldn't escape it. Failed, no way out, nowhere to run. And then, sound of footsteps. Heavy, slow. Figure stepped out of shadows. Couldn't see who at first. As figure came closer, breath caught in my throat. Ben. Face ashen, eyes empty. But something else there. Faint, twisted smile on his lips. Throat slashed, blood long dried. But he was standing. There, in front of me. No, not alive. Not in any way that mattered. He's ours now, Liam. Sarah said, voice flat, just like you will be. Mind reeling. Ben. Dead, but standing, smiling. Part of it now. Part of whatever dark force consumed them all. Staggered back, mind shattering. No, I can't. Maisie stepped forward again, small hand reaching for me. She's waiting, she whispered. Come with us. She's been waiting for you. Tried to pull away. Useless. Shadows closed in, swallowing everything. Air colder, ground harder under my feet. Nowhere left to run. And then I felt it. Something sharp, cold pressing against my skin. Looked down. Blade. The one I'd carried since this nightmare began. Now held by Ben. She's waiting, Sarah's voice echoed in my mind. Didn't have a choice anymore. World went dark. They found me weeks later, deep in your conscious. Traces of blood. No sign of Sarah. No Ben, no answers. Just whispers about the lost path. Kirko's woods, little say they're still out there. Dark force waiting. For anyone foolish enough to wander too far. And if you ask anyone who knows Yosemite, they'll tell you one thing. She's waiting. Always. My name's Ethan, and I guess you could say I'm a bit of a recluse. Turning 35 this year, and honestly, the best decision I ever made was ditching the 9 to 5, the grind, and going off. Grid. This all went down early October last year, 2024. Mojave Desert, California. Middle of nowhere. Exactly how I liked it. Used to have the whole suburban dream wife house, the works. But when the marriage imploded, all that just vanished. The quiet of the wilderness started calling to me. No drama, no bills, no people asking questions. Just me, the dirt, the wind. And this silence that actually made me feel alive for the first time in years. I built myself a tiny cabin, one room, nestled in these rocky hills, miles from civilization. My only real company was my dog Kaiser, German Shepherd, loyal as hell. Out there, he wasn't just a pet, he was family. Kept me grounded, kept me sane. It was a Thursday morning when things started getting weird. I was patching up the cabin door. Storm had rattled it pretty good when I heard it. A sound that just didn't fit. Kaiser, who was chilling by the door, snapped his head up, ears twitching, eyes locked on something way off in the distance. Then his ears went flat against his skull, tail stiff as a board. I followed his stare, figuring it was a deer or maybe a coyote. Nope. What I saw made my blood run cold. Footprints. Bare human footprints in the dirt. I walked over, checking them out. Fresh. Ours old Max. Weird thing was, no trail leading up to them. It was like whoever made them just materialized there. They stopped right at the edge of the clearing where my cabin stood. No one around. Hello. I yelled, voice echoing in the silence. Nothing. I crouched down, looking closer at the tracks. Not deep, but definitely there. Could make out the shape of a foot, faint to prints. But something was off. The spacing, the way they were pressed into the ground, didn't make sense. Like whoever walked there was floating, not stepping. Gliding instead of walking. Kaiser let out a low growl deep in his chest, eyes never leaving the spot where the track started. Every muscle in his body was tense. I knew that look. Something was wrong. Seriously wrong. I stood up, scanned the area again. Still nothing. Just the silence, thick and heavy. A few hours later, my old buddy Danny rolls up, out of the blue. Danny and I go way back. Always had some hustle going. Always chasing the next big thing. We used to run together back in the day, before I bailed on all that. Turns out, Danny was in the area, trying to keep a low profile after some deal went south. Danny had a knack for trouble. And now he needed a place to hide. His beat-up truck pulls up, kicking up dust. Tires spitting gravel. He wasn't alone. Some dude I didn't recognize with shotgun. Heavy-set guy, late 40s, camo jacket, and a permanent scowl etched on his face. Danny hops out, waves, all smiles. Ethan. Good to see you, man. Figured I might find you out here. I didn't exactly share his enthusiasm, just nodded. What brings you to my neck of the woods, Danny? He hesitated. Glanced at the stranger in the truck. Need a place to lay low. Just for a couple days, things got complicated. His eyes darted away, and I caught this nervous edge in his voice. Danny wasn't one to show fear. Something was definitely up. Didn't trust it, but I owed Danny a few. All right, I said, stepping back to let them in. Roof over your head. But I don't want any trouble, Danny. Danny grins, but it looked forced. No trouble, I promise. Just need to get our bearings, then we're out of your hair. That night, after a dinner of beans and rice, nothing fancy out here, Danny starts telling me this story. A story I really didn't want to hear. Listen, man, Danny says, voice low, almost a whisper. There's something out here. Something bad. I can't explain it, but it's been hunting me for weeks. I raise an eyebrow. Hunting you. What are you talking about? He glances at the stranger beside him, then back at me. I think we messed with the wrong people. Cartel. Yeah, but there's something else. Something that's been picking us off, one by one. I didn't laugh. Didn't call him crazy. Because as he's talking, the hairs on my neck are standing up. I'd heard whispers about things out in these deserts, old stories, but I never bought into them. Not until now. You think something's hunting you? I ask, skeptical. Like a person. Danny shakes his head, eyes wide. No, not a person. Something worth seeing it. It doesn't look human. I almost laughed then, but something in his eyes stopped me. Danny was a lot of things, but superstitious wasn't one of them. Something in the desert. I ask, still doubtful. What is it? A beer. He shakes his head harder this time, almost frantic. No beer. Something else. I don't know, just coming for me. Silence hangs heavy in the cabin. Then I hear it, faint sound carried on the wind. Almost a whisper, but too clear. Do you hear that? I ask, standing up, heart hammering. Danny and the stranger exchange a look, both just as spooked as I am. But neither of them says anything. And that's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Kaiser, who'd been quiet by the fire, suddenly jumps up, low growl rumbling in his chest. For raised teeth bared, I follow his gaze across the clearing to the edge of the trees. Something moved. Just a shadow, a flicker of something tall, unnatural. A figure standing too still. I take a step forward, heart pounding. Who's out there? I call, but my voice is swallowed by the vast emptiness. The figure doesn't move. Then it's gone. The night drags on. Sleep is a joke. Too on edge to even close my eyes properly. But when I finally do drift off and wake up the next morning, something's changed. The footprints are back. Closer this time, right up to the cabin door. I look over at Danny. He's not even paying attention. Eyes wide, lost somewhere else. I try to shake it off, tell myself it's nothing. but I can't. Something is out there, and it isn't human. We have no freaking idea what we're dealing with. But one thing's for sure, it's not going to leave us alone. Sun barely cresting the horizon when I step out of the cabin next morning. Heart's still hammering from the night before. Air's cold, crisp, the kind that makes your breath cloud up even in the early light. I walk over to the door where I found those footprints yesterday. They're still there, closer now. Way closer. I crouch down, run my fingers over the faint outlines in the dirt. Human, definitely, but still off. Prints aren't deep, like someone walking light. Or something not quite human. I look around again, scanning the clearing. No movement. No trace of whoever or whatever left them. Kaiser's right beside me, eyes darting back and forth, low growl rumbling in his chest. Something's out there. I can feel it too, this prickling unease under my skin. Stand up, wipe my hands on my jeans. Danny. I yell, voice still rough with sleep.
Get up.
You need to see this. Danny stumbles out of the cabin, face pale like he hasn't slept a wink. He looks at the footprints, eyes widening, then nervously scans the trees. It's here. He mutters, voice shaky. What do you mean, it's here? I ask, stepping back towards the cabin, eyes glued to the ground. You said something was hunting you. What exactly are we dealing with, Danny? Danny rubs his face, hands trembling slightly. I don't know, man. I've seen it once. Just for a second. But that's second enough. It's not normal. Tall, almost like a man, but face ain't right. And the way it moved, not like anything I ever seen. I turn to face him fully. You're saying this thing is hunting you, but why? Why here? Why now? Danny's eyes are wild, darting around the clearing again. I don't know. But I'm telling you, it's not just me. It's been picking people off. Cartel guys, hikers, even some locals. You heard the stories, Ethan. People go missing out here all the time. But no one talks about what's really happening. They're scared. We should be too. I glance over at Kaiser. He's still standing perfectly still, ears pinned back. He never acts like this unless something's seriously wrong. My stomach clenches. My first instinct is to write it off as paranoia. Danny's freaking out. But his eyes, they're dead serious. He's not lying. Before I can say anything else, Kaiser barks. Once. Sharp, abrupt. And then he's off, charging towards the edge of the clearing, straight for the trees. Body low. Tail stiff and straight. Kaiser. I yell, panic spiking. But he's already gone, swallowed by the woods. Duke, come back. I start running after him, calling his name, boots crunching on the dirt.
Kaiser, come back.
I'm winded by the time I hit the tree line. Forest is dense, shadows long and dark even with the sun climbing. No sign of him. I stop, trying to listen, straining for any sound. Just the wind whispering through the branches. Then I hear his bark. Not far off. Close. Too close. I push through the brush, heart pounding. Mind racing. What the hell is out there? What's got him? Round a big oak. And freeze. There's Kay just a feet as where, sitting on the ground, tail thumping softly, but his eyes locked on something in front of him. Stands tense, alert, but not scared. That's weird. If something was out there, something dangerous, he'd be on high alert, not just sitting there like everything's normal. And then I see it, a figure, standing in the shadows of the trees. At first, I think it's a person. But then I see the way it moves. Slow, deliberate, body unnaturally tall, thin. Air on it seems to shimmer like reality itself is bending. Thing's skin is stretched tight over bones, pale. Almost see-through, no hair, no features. Just dark, empty sockets where eyes should be. I'm frozen. Can't move, can't breathe. It takes a step forward, and I hear the scraping sound on the ground. Nails long, curved nails dragging on the earth. Sound chills me to the bone. Instinctively, I take a step back, but Kaiser, he doesn't move, doesn't bark, doesn't react at all. The creature tilts its head slightly, like it's curious, studying me. I want to scream, run, do anything. But my feet are rooted, like a deer in headlights, paralyzed by pure, unadulterated fear. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it's gone. Vanished back into the trees like it was never even there. My legs give out. I collapse to the ground, breath ragged and even. Look around, dazed, trying to make sense of what just happened. Mind spinning. Logical side of me fighting for an explanation. Trick of the light, shadow, anything. But deep down I know the truth. That thing was real. Ethan. Danny's voice breaks through the fog. He's standing behind me, face white as a sheet, body rigid with fear. What did you see? I can't answer. Don't even know how to explain it. Just stare at the spot where the creature was praying it won't come back. Finally, I turn to Danny, voice a hoarse whisper. It's here, Danny. Whatever you saw, it's real. Danny's eyes widen even more. Steps back, breath coming faster. Told you, didn't I? Told you it wasn't just some hallucination. Suddenly, Kaiser stands up, tail wagging like nothing even happened. Walks back towards us, calm as you please. Like he wasn't just staring down some creature from hell. But I don't feel calm. I feel hunted. Come on, I say, standing up shaky as hell. We need to get back to the cabin. Danny doesn't argue. Follows me in silence, eyes darting nervously, always looking over his shoulder. Can't blame him. I'm doing the same damn thing. Back at the cabin, I lock the door behind us. But the feeling of being watched doesn't fade. Still there, lurking just outside. Waiting, watching. Hours crawl by intense silence. Neither of us talks much. But it doesn't take a genius to know what we're both thinking. That thing isn't gone. It's still out there. Night starts to fall. Try to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut, but it just gets worse as the shadows lengthen. Silence broken only by the creak of the old cabin wood. Then, just before dark, I hear it again. A sound distant but unmistakable, soft scratching noise, like claws on wood. Kaiser growls again, low and guttural, eyes narrowed. I stand up, heart hammering in my chest. We need to go. Now. But Danny doesn't move. Frozen, staring out the window, eyes wide. And that's when I see it too. Thing isn't just caught there anymore. It's right outside the cabin. It followed us back. Door rattles. Low, ominous sound like it's testing the wood. We both back away from the door. Fear, cold and paralyzing, grips us tight. Then the knocking starts. The knocking starts quiet. Soft, slow at first. Like a tree branch tapping against the window in the wind. But then it gets deliberate, firm. Almost purposeful. Each strike vibrates through the door, rattling the wood, sending shivers down my spine. It's not the wind. Not an animal testing the structure. It's something else. Someone. Or something else. I take a step back from the door, mind racing. What the hell is that? Danny's frozen too, back pressed against the wall across the room, eyes wide with pure panic. Kaiser, surprisingly, isn't barking. Standing rigid, ears flat against his skull, eyes locked on the door, like he knows what's out there. Door rattles again. Louder this time. I move towards the window, peering out between the ragged curtains. Darkness outside is thick, pressing in on the cabin. Moonlight barely cuts through the trees, leaving only shadows in the yard. No sign of anyone, or anything, but I know better than to think we're alone. Danny, I whisper harshly, not wanting to make too much noise. Get the rifle. Danny barely reacts at first. Body stiff, still paralyzed by fear. But after a moment, he blinks like snapping out of a trance. Stumbles towards the corner where I keep the rifle. Hands are shaking too bad to even grip the barrel. I grab it from him, trying to calm my own racing heart. Keep it together, Danny. Just keep quiet. Stay behind me. Knocking continues. Now it's insistent, like something is trying to break in. Then, suddenly, I hear a voice, a whisper. Soft, almost lost in the wind. Let me in, not human. Guttural, like a growl mixed with a rasp. Cold wave of terror washes over me. I step back, heart hammering. Voice, if you can even call it, that came from right outside the door. Who's there? I call. Voice trembling despite myself. Who's out there? Long pause, followed by a low, drawn-out chuckle. Kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl. I've been waiting for you, it says. Almost teasing. That's when it hits me, not just the knocking. The voice thing isn't just knocking to get in, it's mocking us. Taunting us. I turn quickly, motioning for Danny to move further into the cabin. Slam the bolt shut on the door, even though I know it won't stop whatever's on the other side. I can hear it now, scratching at the wood, like it's trying to dig its way through. Danny, get the damn gun. I snap, voice getting more urgent. Danny barely moves, still glued to the corner. Sweat's pouring down his face, breath coming in ragged gasps. See it then. The man who seemed so self-assured, so confident just hours ago. Completely broken. Whatever's outside has shattered him. And I'm not sure how much longer he can hold it together. I look back at the door, then to the window, and then back to the door again. It's right outside, whatever it is. and it's waiting. Then, as suddenly as it started, the knocking stops. Complete silence fills the cabin. I can hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Wait, it feels like hours, trying to steady my breath. Kaiser's beside me, growling softly, but he's not tense anymore. Just alert, like he's waiting for something to happen. But nothing does. Silence stretches on. Still frozen, gripped tight on the rifle. Should we go outside? Danny asks, voice barely a whisper. No, I say too quickly, too loud. We're not going out there. We wait. Another half hour. An hour. Time loses all meaning. Can't tell if it's morning or night anymore. All I know is the knocking hasn't come back. But that doesn't mean we're safe. I can still feel it. Feel the eyes of whatever's out there, watching us, waiting for us to screw up. I pace around the cabin, mind racing. Creature got close. Too close. And Danny's story, as unbelievable as it sounded, starting to make sense. We're not dealing with an animal. Not even a person. Think about the footprints. Found them earlier, leading right up to the cabin. Weren't there yesterday. Appeared out of nowhere. Thing that made them, it's toying with us. Playing some sick game. And I have no freaking clue what the rules are. That's when I hear it. Soft scraping sound from the ceiling. Freeze, staring up at the darkened rafters. There it is again, like claws against wood. Slow, deliberate. Kind of noise that makes you wonder if you're even hearing it or just imagining things. Scratching grows louder. I raise the rifle, moving quietly across the room, finger on the trigger. Danny doesn't move, just watches, face pale and slack. Looks like he's aged 10 years in the last few hours. Then ceiling collapses. Not the whole roof, just part of it. Enough to let something fall through. Hurt nearly stops as a dark figure drops from the rafters, landing on the floor with an eerie thud. Tall, thin, unnaturally long limbs stretching out like a spider. No face. Just black, empty sockets where eyes should be. Kaiser barks, charging towards it. But before I can react, the thing reaches down, grabs him by the throat. Kaiser yelps, struggling. But Creature's grip is like iron. Kaiser, I shout, raising the rifle. No, too late. Creature grip tightens, one violent tug. Snap. Kaiser's neck breaks. Wave of rage and despair washes over me, mixed with the terror. Not sure which is stronger. Creature turns towards me, head tilting at an unnatural angle. Opens its mouth. Or, at least, I think it opens its mouth. No mouth to speak of. Just expansive darkness that seems to swallow the light around it. Takes a step forward. I pull the trigger. Gunshot echoes in the cabin. Deafening. Creature staggers back. Thin, high-pitched screech rips from the black void where its mouth should be. But it doesn't fall, doesn't die. Just shrieks in agony and fury. I fire again and again, each shot hitting it, but doing nothing to stop it, like firing at smoke. I back away slowly, mind screaming at me to run, get out. But there's nowhere to go. Cabin's our prison. And the thing outside our jailer. Danny, who's been paralyzed by fear, finally seems to snap. Grabs a knife from the table, lunges at the creature, yelling something I can't hear over the chaos. Thing just reaches out, grabs Danny's arm, and twists. Hear a sickening crack. Danny screams. Creature silences him with another twist of its hand. Danny goes limp, body dangling from the thing's grasp. That's when it hits me. We're not just dealing with something that hunts us. We're dealing with something that's feeding on us. I can't breathe. Body frozen, paralyzed. Danny's body dangles limply, arm bent at an impossible angle, blood dripping on the floor. Eyes wide, glazed over with shock and pain. But he's not screaming anymore. Life's gone out of him in an instant. I have to move. Do something, but I can't think. Creature thing is not like anything I've ever encountered. Not human, not just hunting. It's enjoying this, feeding off our terror. Can see it in the way its head tilts, the way those dark, empty sockets seem to pierce right through me. Not just alive, something older, something evil. Raise the rifle, hands trembling, heart pounding in my ears. Has to be a way to stop it. I fire again, point blank, straight at the creature's chest, where its heart should beat. Shot echoes through the cabin again, deafening in the enclosed space. Creature recoils, but not in pain, not hurt, amused. Seems to grow taller, limbs elongating further, body shifting, like a shadow made flesh, twisting in impossible ways. I fire again and again. Not enough. Every bullet seems to pass right through it, like it's nothing, like it's not even there. It just gets closer, and now it's smiling, or at least That's what I think when I see the gaping hole open wide in the center of its face. Jagged black teeth that don't belong to any creature on this earth. I turn away, scream ripping out of my throat. What the hell do you want from us? I shout, voice breaking. Why are you doing this? Creature doesn't answer, just reaches towards me with its long, skeletal hand. And I know in that instant it's going to kill me. But then something strange happens. Something I don't understand. Danny's body. His lifeless, limp form twitches. Spasms. Can see it even though my vision's blurring with panic. Eyes roll back in his head, and then, with an awful creaking sound, his mouth opens. Ethan. Voice muffled, like he's speaking underwater. Ethan, don't let it take you. Creature's grip loosens. Split second. And in that moment, I see the truth. Danny's still alive. Sort of. Possessed. Thing that's been dragging him down into the darkness, feeding on you, somehow entered him. Eyes aren't Danny's anymore. Black. Hollow. Void of any trace of humanity. I know then. Whatever's left of my friend is gone. What stands before me isn't him. It's the creature. It's taken him. Stumble back. Fighting for bridge and blurring. Tears mixing with fear and rage. Gotta act fast. Or I'll end up like Danny. Like whatever that is. Sprint across the room, desperate for way out. Back door. Only option, sliver of hope. Reach for the knob. Thing slams its hand against the wood from the outside, rattling the hinges violently. No. That's when I know what I have to do. I'm not going to survive this. But I'm not letting this thing take anyone else. Not if I can help it. Run to the corner. Grab the last of my supplies. What little ammo I have left. Lighter. Bottle of gasoline I'd been saving. Don't know how long it'll keep, but it's all I got. Creature's growl reaches my ears. Low, guttural, just before I light the match. Fire spreads fast. Catching on the walls of the cabin. Flames lick at the beams above, heat scorching my skin. Can see it in the flickering light. Creature. Thing that took Danny. Killed, guided me. Lunges towards me. Long limbs reaching for my throat. But as it moves, flames touch it. It screams. Noise like nails scraping across metal. Crackles like the fire itself has a mind of its own. Creature shrieks, twisting, writhing in the flames. Form starts to distort, disintegrate, like fire's not just consuming its body, but its very existence. Air around it warps, bends, shadowy form collapsing in on itself like it was never solid to begin with. Don't stop to watch. Turn bolt through the door, gasping for breath, fleeing into the desert. Flames from the cabin light up the night sky, casting long twisted shadows across the barren land. Earth's thick with smoke, choking me as I run. I don't know where I'm going. Don't know if anyone will ever find me, but I made it out barely. Night stretches on. Hours slipping by as I stumble through the wilderness, trying to outrun the memory of the cabin. The things inside, what happened to Danny? By the time sun starts to rise, painting the sky in reds and oranges, I've reached the nearest road, nearest town, nearest place that isn't a nightmare. Try to call for help. No signal. No one will know where I am. FBI will come eventually, I'm sure of it. No, whatever happened in that cabin will be covered up. Just like all the disappearances in this desert before. Stories of people going missing in Mojave for years. Government wants to keep it that way. But that creature, whatever it was, gone. At least, I hope it's gone. Hope the flames destroyed it completely. Sitting there, waiting for someone to find me, I hear a voice. Soft at first. Just a whisper in the wind. Ethan. Whip my head around. No one there. But then I hear it again. Louder this time. Ethany.
Dan, I know I said
Don't turn around. Don't look. And when the wind shifts, I run. As fast as I can, because I know something worse is coming. Darkness has followed me. And it's never really gone.